Chapter 967. Tens of thousands of undead creatures rushed out and surrounded the five commanders. Five incomparably majestic rays of light that seemed to connect the entire world directly stood in the sky above the central city. No matter how the undead creatures charged at them like tidal waves, they were unable to break through the defense of the five commanders. On the contrary, as streams of five-colored light swept past in the sky, they continued to kill the souls that engulfed them crazily. The five commanders joined forces, and the five types of rings' energies were almost connected into one. They complemented and complemented each other, and the efficiency increased by countless times. This was also a method that the five commanders were trying to conserve their powers. After all, Great had been besieging them, but had never gone all out. How could they not know his intentions? It was only when the attacks were too ferocious that they would get Fahue to self-detonate in order to conserve the other's energy. However, this time around, as Grade looked at the five commanders who were desperately retaliating and the streams of Ring's energies scattering in void space, the desire in his heart grew increasingly stronger. At the next moment, he stood up abruptly and let out a maniacal laugh. Then he turned into a black tempest and dashed out toward the five of them. Edward, today I'll let you guys see my true means. I'll tell you why the Black Army is the strongest faction amongst the 13 armies. As Grade spoke, his body swelled up crazily. In the blink of an eye, the black tempest he had turned into had already encompassed the entire sky above the central city with an engulfing aura. Eerie winds howled furiously, covering up the sky and sun. At the sight of this scene, everyone in the city panicked. It was because the scene before them was too similar to the heavenly river that Urbian had turned into. The black wind turned into Grade's big face, looking at the five commanders with a savage expression. With a furious bellow, it brought along waves of black shock waves that gushed out toward the five of them. Feel despair. A great battle instantly broke out. Right now, Grade was truly unleashing his full powers, allowing Edward and the others to sense how powerful he was. The omnipresent black, eerie winds kept on tearing through the sky at several tens of times the speed of sound. Wherever they passed by, even the armor plates of tanks were as brittle as paper. The five-color divine light that the five commanders had joined forces to perform kept on being pushed back under this attack. It was being suppressed into a lump that was the size of a field. But in the next moment, the five rays of light suddenly twisted into one and actually mixed together. It was as if five types of pigments had been poured together, and they spun for a while before finally transforming into a pure silver light. Amidst the silver light, Urbian took a step forward and punched the air. It was like a comet striking the moon, destroying the moon and sinking the sun. An earth-shattering sound spread out for 3,000 miles, and the black wind that filled the sky was dispersed by this punch. A furious roar rang out. Ulpian. An angry roar mixed with a panicked expression came from the remnants of the black wind. Edward's voice then rang out from the depths of the sky. Grade, do you think that Urbian didn't leave behind any backup plans? If the few of us work together, we will be able to unleash the power that he left behind that day. This is also why we can't have internal strife, but it can also prevent external enemies. Why didn't I know about this? Grade's heart sank. He's been guarding against me from the very beginning? Looking at how Urbian's phantom image had shattered him with a single punch, Grade's heart wavered, and he gradually had the intention to retreat. However, at the next moment, a surge of greed and desire rose in his heart. If this power is sufficient to defeat me, you guys would have used it long ago. I don't believe that I won't be able to fend off a stream of power that Urbian left behind casually even if I go all out. At the thought of this, Grade let out a furious bellow. He opened his mouth and inhaled like a whale taking in water. In the blink of an eye, a myriad of departed spirits flew into his mouth. Countless engulfing departed spirits bellowed out in terror in midair, begging Grade to let them off. However, how could Grade care? As he engulfed them, the sinister black wind that he had turned into once again swelled up. Urbian's phantom image took another step forward and punched out toward Grade across space. With an explosive rumble, Grade's engulfing was interrupted, and over 1/3 of the black wind dissipated. However, he bellowed out excitedly, I was almost deceived by you guys. This isn't Urbian's power at all. Edward, you're imitating his power, right? With his pride, how would he think that he wouldn't be able to return early and leave behind any backup plans? Edward, as expected of the Gold Army's commander. To think that you've already figured out some of the profoundness of Urbian's power after only half a year has passed. If you're given enough time, you might really be able to defeat me. Saying this, his tone turned cold. Since that's the case, all the more I can't let you live. In that instant, the black tempest rose up once again, and countless engulfing departed spirits were thrown into it, causing it to keep on getting stronger and attacking Urbian's phantom image. However, for the next few attacks, the prowess of the phantom image became increasingly weaker, while the black wind that Grade had turned into became increasingly stronger. Countless black shock waves came gushing over, finally shattering the phantom image. With a Buddhist proclamation, Reverend Fahue's entire body burned with orange flames as he plunged into the black tempest. The tempest swelled up abruptly and then exploded. Although its power was greatly reduced, it was still not wiped out. Priest Longmai punched out, and several hundred white dragons came gushing out with a momentum that seemed as if they could tear the world apart. Akaryu Jushuru let out a soft bellow, and streams of blood-red light turned into sword shadows that pierced out toward Grade. Each sword shadow was in the shape of the Panway sword. Clearly, he had already comprehended some of the profoundness of the Panway sword. Hui also attacked at full power. His entire body instantly started burning up, turning into a shocking long rainbow that slashed out toward the black wind. Edward did not hold back either. He opened his mouth and spewed out a silver heavenly river that stretched across 100 lis, pressing down toward the black wind in the sky. He had clearly imitated some of the profoundness of the heavenly river virtual image that Urbian had created back then. The four armies had attacked at full power in order to finish this battle in one go. Clearly, they understood that if they were still unable to defeat Grade by now, they would be doomed. However, at the next moment, under the four's astonished gazes, the black wind swept out, turning into a black divine dragon that descended from the sky. Today, I'll let you guys witness the black dragon true art that I created for the sake of defeating Urbian. The black dragon opened its mouth and spewed out black flames that incinerated the several hundred white dragons. With a swipe of the dragon's claws, the myriad of blood-colored sword shadows were torn into dust. The dragon's body collided into the astonishing long rainbow that he had transformed into, and in the blink of an eye, the long rainbow was crushed into dust. Simultaneously, the overwhelming heavenly river that Edward had condensed finally descended. It was as if several 10,000 great mountains were pressing down on the black dragon concurrently. However, the black dragon opened its mouth and sucked, swallowing all of them into its stomach. In an instant, Grade swept through the entire place, causing the 5 commanders to suffer from serious injuries and their powers to dissipate. Although Grade's flesh and blood splattered everywhere and his body had shrunk by more than half, he recovered as the devouring souls were sucked into his mouth. Edward and the others looked at this scene in disbelief. They had not expected that Grade would be so powerful. Hui's countenance was grim as he said, "To think that he can activate the ring's energy and create a true life. And as long as the Black Army souls are still around, he'll be able to keep on recovering. He's in an undefeatable position." Edward's countenance was extremely grim. Grade let out a maniacal laugh and grabbed out toward Priest Longmai. Amidst everyone's despairing gazes, Grade suddenly let out an agonizing cry and rolled around crazily. A large piece of flesh protruded out from his dragon's back. Chapter 968. On the back of the black dragon that Grade had turned into, a bump of flesh bulged up rapidly. It was a substance that looked a little like a human. It kept on extending outward and struggling, as if there was a person that wanted to dig out from under the skin of the black dragon's back. With every few inches that human figure darted out, Grade would let out an agonizing cry. The huge dragon's body was like a long snake, rolling to and fro as Grade let out agonizing cries. Wherever the dragon's tail swept past, endless smoke and dust would soar into the sky, smashing over 10 buildings and turning countless buildings into dust. The massive dragon's body kept on colliding against the ground, creating an effect that was like a magnitude 8 earthquake. The seriously injured Edward, Priest Longmai, Hui-He, and Akari Jushra looked at this scene with their eyes and mouths agape. What's happening? It seems like something is going to dig out from his back. At the next moment, a soft sound rang out, and countless drops of blood splattered out. The scales and skin on the dragon's back were finally torn apart, and Feng Xingjian's hands and head popped out. As Feng Xingjian darted out from the dragon's back, Grade let out a heart-wrenching and agonizing cry. The dragon's entire body seemed to have started convulsing as it lay on the ground, trembling. However, it was no longer able to keep on struggling like it had been earlier. The even more terrifying thing was that Grade's body seemed to have been sucked dry of all water. It started to shrink and crack at an unbelievable speed. Feng Xingjian crawled out slowly from Grade's body. He was completely naked, and there was a large amount of transparent substances of unknown composition on his skin. Without looking at the stunned Edward and the others, Feng Xingjian clenched his fists slightly and sensed the seething powers in his body. He made use of the powers of the Heart Sword Path to bewitch and magnify the greed and desires in Grade's body, inciting him to fight head-on against the other commanders. Feng Xingjian finally took the opportunity to absorb all of Grade's powers. It seems that my parasitic sword seed technique has succeeded. I can make use of the hint of emotions in the other party's body to throw their minds into chaos. I can even disguise the other party's will to snatch their powers. It's a pity that Urbian's will is too strong. Being able to mess up his mind is already the limit, and this is all thanks to his pursuit. It was originally impossible, and it was a dead end. Although he had absorbed Grade's powers in one gulp, Feng Xingjian's current strength was too inferior to Grade's. Even if he were to engulf Grade's powers, he would only be able to recover less than 10% of his battle prowess. But on this earth, it was enough. Roar! The dried-up and split-up dragon body on the ground suddenly let out a loud roar. Grade opened his mouth wide and went out to engulf Feng Xingjian, his eyes filled with venomous resentment. Mine! It's all my strength. Give it back. Faced with Grade's final struggle, Feng Xingjian merely turned to throw him a glance. Just this glance alone caused Grade's will to seethe. At the next moment, the greed in Grade's body seemed to have turned into a material power and burst out. He let out a world-shaking, agonizing cry and instantly turned into dust, dissipating into the air. Seeing how Grade had been completely crushed by a single glance, the horror in the eyes of Edward and the others grew even stronger. Feng Xingjian did not pay much attention to this. He just thought of the glance he had earlier. It was a move he had created with his Heart Sword Path, Heart Sword Tribulation. This move was activated by using the opponent's character as nourishment, causing a backlash on the user and causing one's powers to go berserk. The stronger the emotions, the weaker the will, and the stronger the power, the greater the prowess. Although Grade's desires were extremely strong and his body was severely injured to the point of death, he was killed by Feng Xingjian with a single glance. After killing Grade casually, Feng Xingjian's body trembled slightly, and a gush of white steam came out from the surface of his body. The mucus on the surface of his body had completely evaporated. Then he grabbed out casually, and the light in the surroundings changed. It was as if streams of light waves had been grabbed out, turning into a set of white robes that draped over his body. At the sight of this scene, although Edward was terrified, he still braced himself and stepped out. "Sir Urbian, he failed and is already dead," Feng Xingjian said calmly. Although Edward, Hui-He, Akari Jushru, and Priest Longmai had vaguely guessed the outcome when they saw Feng Xingjian appear, they were still stunned when they heard this news. A hint of disbelief flashed in their eyes. Even the powerful, mysterious, and unfathomable Erbian had been defeated. However, Fang Xingjian turned his head slightly, looked at the four of them, and said, "Hand over the rings, and I won't kill you guys." Edward and Priest Longmai frowned slightly, and a hint of intense disbelief flashed in Hui's eyes. The rings were the foundation of their powers and their cultivation. How could they be willing to hand them over so easily? Edward's thirst for knowledge could still be resolved through modern equipment, but Priest Longmai's desire to seek the Tao and Hui's ambition and desire to rule would make them feel as if they were better off dead without their rings. Moreover, Hui and Akari Jushru had only managed to survive with their rings when their physical bodies had been destroyed. This was even more so for Akari Jushru's self-will. His reaction was also the most intense. Almost at the first instant he heard Fang Xingjian's words, he turned into a stream of crimson sword light and soared into the sky. "You're only thinking of escaping now." Fang Xingjian looked coldly at the escaping Akari Jushru. Fang Xingjian had just dashed several thousand meters away when he let out an agonizing cry. A stream of black sword marks suddenly appeared, slashing Akari Jushru at the waist. After this Red Army's leader attacked, his body shattered into pieces, exploding like fireworks. He died completely. Although most of Fang Xingjian's powers have been wiped out, the Divine Country's sword realm, which had been reforged through self-detonation, still had its powers. However, it had also depleted a large part of its powers and needed to recover slowly. However, although its powers have been greatly depleted, the current sword realm could still be said to have condensed all of Fang Xingjian's pinnacle sword arts. It had also integrated Fang Xingjian's microscopic state, as well as the sword arts that had comprehended the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces, the Earth's astral forces, the nuclear forces, and the forces that could cause all living things to decay. Right now, a casual attack from the sword realm could be said to have integrated the powers of the infiltrating void, light pursuit, all-conquering, and instant sword intense. Although its powers have been greatly depleted, it was still sufficient to kill Akari Jushru instantly. As for the full-powered attack that could suppress space, open up a space-time passageway, and banish the opponent to another universe, it was an extremely powerful attack. Fang Xingjian named this move as Void Space Sword Mark. After killing Akari Jushru with a single sword attack, Edward and the other two felt a chill in their hearts. Then they saw Fang Xingjian looking over and saying, "Don't worry. After taking away your rings, I'll naturally pass you guys another set of cultivation arts. However, from today onward, the rings and armies will be history." Chapter 969. With Fang Xingjian's current powers, there was no one on Earth who could be a match for him. Therefore, no one would be able to stop him from doing whatever he wanted to do. Moreover, Great had been wreaking havoc incessantly on Earth. Fang Xingjian merely requested for the army and the rings to be abolished. This made him even more popular. Therefore, in the following period of time, he took away all the rings from the army's warriors while imparting the knight's martial arts. Within a few days, his sudden inspiration sensed a series of throbbing. He understood that the history of this world had really been changed. However, he was not in a hurry to return. Instead, he stayed in this universe to continue recovering his powers while studying sword arts. Half a month passed by. In the sky, Fang Xingjian, who was receiving the astral radiations outside and cultivating, suddenly opened his eyes. There was a hint of surprise in his eyes. "You're back." A stream of white light flashed before him. It was the immortal child, who appeared to be in a bad mood. This was Fang Xingjian's collaborator who had been trapped in the battlefield on the sun previously. Fang Xingjian had thought that the other party had died in Erbian's hands. However, by the looks of it, not only had the other party not died, but he was also full of vigor and his will was revealed. It was as if his powers had increased tremendously. Hearing Fang Xingjian's question, the immortal child let out a breath, shook his head, and said, "Sai, take a look for yourself." With that, he opened up his palm, and a stream of white light surged out from his palm. It was the White Emperor Zenith sword. "This is..." Sensing the White Emperor Zenith sword's aura, Fang Xingjian was slightly stunned. However, at the next moment, his countenance turned grim. With this change, streams of black sword marks extended out in the air. Within a short period of time, the space within a range of several thousand meters seemed to have been slashed into a few thousand pieces. The densely packed sword marks and the sharp auras that burst out from them caused the immortal child's scalp to turn numb. This kid's sword arts cultivation seems to have become stronger again. It seems that he has also benefited a lot from the battle with Erbian. Fang Xingjian stared at the immortal child's palm and said word by word, "Erbian?" Erbian's figure slowly appeared on the White Emperor Zenith sword. He looked at the surrounding sword marks and said calmly, "Your sword realm's power? It seems like your strength has recovered quite well." Fang Xingjian, on the other hand, felt strange. If Erbian was really still alive, then why did he feel that he had passed the trial successfully and could leave this universe at any time? But if Erbian was really dead, then this person in front of him, Fang Xingjian looked at the immortal child and asked, "What is going on?" The immortality saint sighed and said unpleasantly, "You can ask him." Erbian said indifferently, "I'm not the Erbian you know. In the battle with you, my righteous heart was broken, causing the ring's energy to become unstable. At the very last moment, my actual body didn't really die. Instead, it was merged with a supreme existence in the universe." "A supreme existence is a demonic god?" Fang Xingjian said, slightly surprised. "That's right." Erbian nodded, turned to throw a glance at the immortal child, and said, "It's true that you guys know a little more about the multivariate universe than I do. The 13 demonic gods that stand at the top of the multivariate universe are the source of power for the 13 armies in the past." At this point, a cold expression appeared on his face. "Our life's pursuit, in the end, is just a superficial part of their pursuit." He smiled coldly and said, "Most of my actual body's powers and will have merged with the God of universal truth. However, a small part of me retained a hint of humanity and escaped, merging with this White Emperor Zenith sword. Right now, I can be considered to have inherited a portion of Erbian's experiences and memories. I'm the new Erbian." Fang Xingjian fell silent for a moment before asking, "What do you plan to do?" Erbian said calmly, "I've already become one with the White Emperor Zenith sword, and the White Emperor Zenith sword has already become one with the immortal child. Therefore, the oath that he has to abide by, I have to abide by it as well. I won't be able to make an enemy out of you. You don't have to worry about this." Fang Xingjian did not fully trust Erbian. He merely looked at the immortal child and saw the immortal child nod. He then continued, "You wish to work together with us? That's right. Although my battle prowess has broken through the limits, the source of my powers isn't orthodox. They're just charity from the demonic gods. Therefore, I wish to return to your universe with you guys and cultivate your martial arts." At the mention of this, a hint of desire flashed on Erbian's face. "Don't worry, I don't have any ill intentions toward you guys. In the end, the ones who defeated me weren't you guys, and the ones who took away my powers weren't you guys either. My real enemies are just the demonic gods." At the mention of this, a hint of sharpness flashed in Erbian's eyes. "There'll come a day when I'll get those 13 high and mighty fellows to lower their arrogant heads. I'll let them know that humans aren't puppets that they can play around with as they wish." Fang Xingjian and the immortal child exchanged a glance but did not say a word. 2 months later, the 13 armies disappeared completely, and the knight's martial arts spread across the entire world. A tremendous amount of ether particles were produced in void space. Fang Xingjian stood outside the atmospheric layer, looked down at the piece of land that was connected together, frowned, and said, "Do you think that Earth has become like Miracle World?" The immortal child thought of Miracle World, which also only had one piece of land. He smiled bitterly and said, "You mean to say that the timeline of the world I'm in has also been altered by someone? I don't know." Fang Xingjian shook his head. "Everything has come to an end, and my cultivation has recovered completely. It's time for me to leave." The immortal child revealed a meaningful smile in his eyes. "Then let's go." No matter how many twists and turns there had been in this stage, and how many dangers he had experienced, it was still over. Now that he had returned to Miracle World, he would truly possess the cultivation of a Tier 6 divine level expert. How could the immortal child not be happy? At the next moment, the two silhouettes disappeared completely with a flash. It was as if they had never come to this universe before. Simultaneously, countless galaxies in the universe and the long river of time flashed before Feng Xingjian. He felt as if his will had been stripped out from one universe and then thrown into another. In the densely packed void, each point seemed to contain countless universes, and each universe seemed to contain countless timelines. It was dazzling and mesmerizing to look at it. In the end, with a light tremble of his will, he discovered that he had returned to Miracle World. Simultaneously, countless ether particles gushed out wildly toward his conjured physique. Endless knowledge seemed to be channeled into his mind through the nine-tiered heavens through these ether particles. At the next moment, his eyes swept across void space as if he had seen the truth of the entire world. Have I finally reached Tier 6 of the divine level? Chapter 970. At Tier 6 of the divine level, one's strength would truly step from the microscopic realm to the impeccable realm. One would be able to spatial translocation directly and superluminal speed attacks. One would even be able to release a virtual image and become a life form that surpassed that of humans. With a single thought, one would be able to topple mountains and overturn seas and traverse through void space. At this realm, even the conjured physique was no longer important. The size and shape were no longer a problem. The dominator of the universe, the true god of the mortal world. In Miracle World's history, there had been many who did not hold back on praising existences who had attained a breakthrough to Tier 6 of the divine level. Right now, Feng Xingjian sensed the power in his body and knew that he had finally stepped into this realm. He lowered his head and looked at his stats window. Level 35 Martial Will, 8 500 Techniques, Sword Realm, Heart Sword Path. Right now, the 5 attributes on his stats window had all disappeared. It was because right now, conjured physique and ordinary body were no longer meaningful to Feng Xingjian. The only thing that could represent his strength was his martial will. After stepping into Tier 6 of the divine level, his martial will had been raised to 8,500 points, and his strength could be said to be extremely vigorous. As for his techniques, he was only left with the Sword Realm and the new Sword Path, which had been integrated into one. After throwing a glance at his stats window, Feng Xingjian no longer paid attention to this. Instead, he scanned the surrounding space with his eyes. He was very familiar with the powers of Tier 6 of the divine level. Right now, when he looked at the void space in the world, it was not the various waves and particles in the past. Instead, there were countless water-like things pressing down on him, pressing down on all living things in the world. He knew that these things encompassing his body were space. As his body moved, space kept on being compressed like water. However, only things with extremely great quality or power would be able to press down on space and make changes. With a single thought, Feng Xingjian appeared 1,000 meters away with a flash. The entire process was done with just a single thought. It was true teleportation, and he had done it purely through spatial translocation. Tier 6 of the divine level. Spatial translocation. With just this move, I'm almost undefeatable when facing experts below Tier 6 of the divine level. Next is to create a virtual image. Feng Xingjian knew that after reaching Tier 6 of the divine level, one would have a very deep understanding of the world's microscopic profoundness, how they could unleash their abilities. Unleashing their abilities into destructive prowess and battle prowess would depend on their cultivation. It could be said that everyone had different specialties and dispositions. Moreover, Tier 6 divine level experts were not restricted in terms of shape, size, or state. The form that could unleash their battle prowess the most was naturally their virtual image form. However, his sword arts cultivation had already reached the pinnacle, and he also possessed the Sword Realm and Heart Sword Path. His martial will had also grown crazily with the help of the thunder-inducing technique, reaching 8,500 points. Although he had just stepped into Tier 6 of the divine level, his battle prowess could probably be ranked at the top amongst Tier 6 divine level experts in history. Fang Xingjian made a rough estimation. Right now, even if he did not perform illusory arts, he would be able to kill the heavenly lion's corpse with a single strike. Even if he were to go up against Erbian before he could traverse space-time, as long as Erbian did not improve, Fang Xingjian would at least be able to maintain a draw. Just then, the immortal child, who was not far away, also let out a loud laugh, and a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes. After 50 years of hard work, I've finally succeeded. He took a step forward and used spatial translocation to appear behind Fang Xingjian. He looked at Fang Xingjian and said, "Brother Fang, I'll be returning to the church to consolidate my cultivation first. We'll first understand the situation in this world before making arrangements." Fang Xingjian nodded, and the two of them bade each other farewell. Fang Xingjian's body moved slightly, turning into a stream of sword light and darting out in the direction of the imperial capital. A short moment later, a stream of sword light slowly descended where the palace was. Fang Xingjian strolled around in the palace, and with a slight change in his expression, he received the voices of countless people and transmitted them into his mind. He's been away for half a month? Fang Xingjian nodded. This was the benefit of having two different time flows. He had been cultivating in that universe for such a long period of time, but less than half a month had passed here. In the palace's study, the fourth prince was frowning as he looked at the many official documents that had been sent in from various places. Although it had only been half a month since Fang Xingjian had left, the situation in Miracle World had changed, and a few major events had happened. Firstly, a man by the name of Duan Tianhao had risen up strongly in the plains, and he had taken over the various tribes in the plains. He had even defeated and subdued Prince Zuoxian, who Fang Xingjian had sent to suppress the plains. Duan Tianhao had also chosen a new ruler of the plains from the Heavenly Lion King's descendants, who was known as the Azure Heaven Monarch. Tyrant and Prince Philip had also gone to investigate, but they discovered that Duan Tianhao was not very strong. The crux of the matter was that there was an extremely powerful and mysterious person hiding behind him. He was the person who had subdued Prince Zuoxian. The other party's strength was deep and unfathomable, and his martial arts were something that had never been seen before in the world. He possessed an extremely strong killing prowess, and even Tyrant and Prince Philip had to flee after being dealt with serious injuries. It had not been easy for them to bring back this piece of news. In fact, if it was not because they had attained a breakthrough to Tier 4 of the divine level with Fang Xingjian's support and obtained the sudden inspiration senses, they would have died in the plains. As Duan Tianhao rose up strongly, the plains became independent once again. They even sealed off their borders, forbidding anyone from traveling between the two countries. A large number of merchants and knights that the Empire had sent over were detained in the plains. The Empire had gone through many rounds of negotiations, but the other party was still unwilling to let them go. If Duan Tianhao's rise up strongly and the plains regained their independence was said to have brought about great external threats, then the killings caused by the rumors of the Divine Sun Emperor were internal problems. The three places in the south were said to be the locations of the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures, causing a series of killings. Although the Empire had gone all out to stop them and had even sent out divine-level experts to suppress them, they were still unable to stop the greed of humans. Many members of the Empire's upper echelon also wanted to make use of their authority to investigate the three forbidden grounds and search for the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures. Apart from this, there was another troublesome matter. Lilia had been sent to the plains to train herself, but now that the borders between the two countries were closed, she was unable to return. At the thought of this, the fourth prince's frown deepened. He picked up a document and started reading it. It was a letter sent by the plains' new ruler, the Azure Heaven Monarch. 1 month later, The Divine Treasures meeting will be held to announce the secret of the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures and discuss the distribution of the treasures with the various major influences in the world, as well as the problem of fending off the seventh onslaught. To think that the Empire, the Church, the various countries in the North, and even the Mage Association and the Barbarians have been invited. Many top-notch factions from various countries have also been invited. This is really... Looking at this letter, the fourth prince let out a sigh. It's really the calm before the storm. Chapter 971. The fourth prince believed that with the news of the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures, the various major influences that Duan Tianhao had invited would probably send people over. At that time, it would be the first time that the few strongest influences in this land would meet. This was especially so for the plains, the Empire, the Mage Association, the Holy See of Truth, the various countries in the north under the Church, and the many barbarians in the ice plains in the extreme north. These influences had a lot of blood feuds with each other, and if they were to gather together now, they would probably fight to the death. At the thought of all the twists and turns, the fourth prince felt a headache. The crux was that even if the Empire had the assistance of the Black Mage King and the Gold Mage King, they would not be able to control the situation. Just the thought of the many guardian kings from the Church made his scalp turn numb. What on earth is this Duan Tianhao trying to do? To think that he wants to gather so many experts in this land. Is he really not afraid of death? The fourth prince still could not figure out why Duan Tianhao was doing this. The consequences of gathering so many top-notch influences in this land were not something that Duan Tianhao could handle. This also made the fourth prince unable to guess what Duan Tianhao's goal was. Just then, the fourth prince felt his vision blur, and a hint of surprise immediately flashed on his face. Xingjian. Right now, Fang Xingjian had appeared before him. This naturally meant that Fang Xingjian had succeeded in clearing the stage. At the thought of this, a hint of disbelief flashed in the fourth prince's eyes. I've succeeded. Fang Xingjian nodded and said, has anything major happened in this land recently? Although he asked this, he did not sense that the few people close to him were in any danger due to his sudden inspiration. This was why he had come to ask the fourth prince. The fourth prince let out a breath, and he seemed to relax. With Fang Xingjian attaining a breakthrough to Tier 6 of the divine level, the entire empire would be at peace. With such a pillar supporting the country, what else would there be to be afraid of? At the same time, on the grassland, there was not a single trace of green, only countless gravel and gravel. There was only a huge stone pillar that rose into the sky, like a sharp sword piercing the sky, filled with a desolate and unyielding will. At the top of the stone pillar, Duan Tianhao looked coldly at the vast land under his feet. Waves flowed in his eyes, and no one knew what he was thinking. Behind him, his younger sister, Duan Zian, looked at him worriedly and said, "Brother, are you really going to do this?" After Duan Tianhao and Duan Zian's clan were wiped out, Duan Tianhao and Duan Zian's clan members, Duan Tianhao had come to a forbidden ground to seek help. Duan Tianhao even directly accepted the other party's importation of will and activated the spirit root in his body, cultivating the great star shifting technique that the other party passed down. All of Duan's was prince members had Duan Xingjian's clan members help. Du clan members of Nguyu EXS Duan Wang, Du the Marshal Wu Kum, and the leader of the Yu had Du Xingjian Sex King, Wu Xingjian Marshal Tian Li, 6th Duking Dynasty, Sect Duking the Dynasty King Dynasty, were you. Duan Tianhao could not think of anyone who could be a match for the 6th-tier 6 divine level experts. This was especially so when the leader of the Quanji 7 was about to break out as well. There would be no one in the world who could stop them, Duan Zian said worriedly. But the Holy See of Truth and the Mage Association are all forces with deep foundations. They have 12 Mage Kings, 21 Guardian Kings, and 3 Saints. With so many experts holding down the fort, who knows how many killing moves they have hidden up their sleeves? So what? Duan Tianhao said proudly. Master and the others are Tier 6 divine level experts. Even if any one of them were to make a move, they would be able to wipe out the entire world. Before absolute power, so what if one has a great background and a long legacy? The strength of a Tier 6 divine level expert is something that other experts are unable to compare to. In the past, it was only major characters like Adam and the formidable divine king who were able to seal them. How can there be another Saint Adam and a formidable divine king in this world? The Holy See of Truth doesn't even have the Pope anymore. If it wasn't because of those people's sudden inspiration, the entire world would have been in a state of turmoil. At the thought of this, a hint of coldness flashed in his gaze. In order not to expose his strength in advance and alert the enemy, and in order to complete his plan, he had avoided the various experts' sudden inspiration. Even when Tyrant had come to the plains, his master had not killed him and had only chased him away. Each time he thought of this, Duan Tianhao felt as if his heart and liver were being bitten by a venomous snake. But those are the powers of others. Moreover, those few old fellows are extreme and vicious in their actions, resorting to unscrupulous means to achieve their goals. This time around, in order to rescue their leader, they even had to sacrifice so many experts in the world, Duan Zian said with a frown. Big brother, they're just making use of you. So what if they're making use of me? Duan Tianhao smiled coldly and said, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be able to take revenge even if I were to cultivate for another 100 or 1,000 years. However, as long as the plan is completed, I'll be able to crush Tyrant and Feng Xingjian like bugs. At the thought of this, a hint of elation flashed on Duan Tianhao's face. It was as if he could already see the scene of him taking revenge and bathing the imperial capital in blood. Younger sister, don't worry. This time around, 6 Tier 6 divine level experts have taken action together and even opened up a small world in advance, avoiding the sudden inspiration senses. Even the Holy See of Truth and the Mage Association won't be able to stop them in time. And once His Highness the Prince is released, who in this world will be a match for him? That person known as the Prince was clearly the leader of the Quanji 7 people. Hearing Duan Tianhao's words, Duan Zian sighed. Big brother, you're betraying the entire world for the sake of our clan's vengeance. Who will be able to fend off the 7th onslaught in the future? Hearing Duan Zian's words, a hint of savageness flashed on Duan Tianhao's face. Betray? When our Four Seasons villa was wiped out by that traitor Fong, who stepped out to speak up for us, when we were struggling to escape and hiding from the East military order's pursuit, who came to help us? As long as I can take revenge, I won't care even if the world is destroyed or if the world is destroyed. Moreover, we're descendants of the Western land to begin with. Whatever happens in this world has nothing to do with us. Duan Zian looked at Duan Tianhao and let out a soft sigh. He was getting further and further away from the elder brother in her memory. Simultaneously, in a small world that was parallel to Miracle World, the fat priest grinned, and the fats all over his body trembled intensely. Everything is ready, and we're just missing the final push. I didn't make the wrong choice, Duan Tianhao. Before him, a priest who was wrapped up in heavy long robes said coldly, why do we have to go through so much trouble? When I took a mental tour of the world previously, regardless of whether it's the Mage Association or the Holy See of Truth, they're just a bunch of useless people. They don't even have a single Tier 6 divine level expert. We could just capture them and sacrifice them. The fat priest shook his head and said, Tuanzi, don't underestimate the 2 sacred lands that have a legacy of over 10,000 years. Chapter 972. The fat priest's face trembled a little as he said in a low voice, have you forgotten about that white emperor aura sword from back then? At the mention of the lightsaber, the complexion of the man, called Tuanzi, changed. His whole body swelled up like a ball. He seemed to have thought of the divine sword that had killed them 1,000 years ago and made them flee helmets and leave their armor behind. Tuanzi let out a breath and said, things are different now. The White Emperor Aura sword has been split into 3, and there aren't any outstanding geniuses like Adam and the formidable Divine King in this world. This is the best opportunity for us to make a move. The fat priest shook his head and said calmly, "It's not that simple. The situation in this world is much deeper than what we thought it to be. Adam and the formidable divine king are no longer around, but don't forget that the Mage Association didn't make a move 1,000 years ago." The fat priest then turned and said coldly, "Tawanzi, don't be rash. We'll talk about everything after we rescue eldest brother and open up the divine Sun Emperor's treasures. If I were to find out that you've caused unnecessary trouble and affected our great plan before then don't blame me for not showing mercy to our brotherhood." As the fat priest said this, a chilly wind seemed to engulf Tawanzi's mind, causing his body to tremble slightly, and a hint of trembling flashed in his eyes. "Your heavenly secret's shifting technique has recovered?" His gaze narrowed as he looked at the fat priest departing back. A sentence seemed to flash in his mind. "When the heavens send out murderous intents, the stars change positions. 1,000 years have passed. How much of the heavenly secret's shifting technique can you still activate?" In the Empire's palace, Feng Xingjian quietly listened to the fourth prince's narration. He nodded and said, "It's been hard on you." The fourth prince shook his head and said, "I've only done some small things. The crux is what to do about the upcoming Divine Treasures meeting. Just do what you need to do with this matter. I'll head over personally." Hearing Feng Xingjian's words, the fourth prince heaved a sigh of relief. In his opinion, with Feng Xingjian's current Tier 6 divine level powers, he would naturally be able to suppress the situation. Feng Xingjian continued, "For the time being, I will stay in the Imperial Palace. Every few days, I will explain martial arts. Call everyone back." Hearing Feng Xingjian's arrangements, the fourth prince's eyes lit up. Right now, Feng Xingjian had stepped into Tier 6 of the divine level and could be said to be the world sovereign. His cultivation was extraordinary, and it was natural that he could not wait to have such an existence willing to explain martial arts. However, he soon frowned again. "But Lilia and the others are still in the plains. Should we send someone to fetch them back?" Feng Xingjian shook his head and said, "I've already given them the 9th level of the mystical prince and countless resources. At this stage, their foundations have already far surpassed that of the people in this world. If they're still trapped in the grasslands like this, it means that they're worthless trash." As he spoke, Feng Xingjian's figure disappeared before the fourth prince with a flash. He returned to his secret training room, and his finger sliced across the space before him gently. It was as if he could see streams of black sword marks extending out, filling up the space before him like cracks in space. "What should my virtual image look like?" Feng Xingjian thought to himself. "I wonder who's behind the Divine Treasures meeting. I also need to check the seals on the Quanji 7 people." At the thought of this, his body trembled slightly, and 3 black shadows darted out from his body, merging into void space and disappearing. After sending out 3 clones to check out the situation, Feng Xingjian's attention was once again focused on himself. Streams of pitch-black sword marks extended out from his body, extending out toward the surrounding space. These sword marks contracted and contracted as if the surrounding space was trembling, emitting an extremely dangerous aura. My virtual image, many sword techniques and knowledge about the microscopic world flashed past in Feng Xingjian's mind. The sword marks in the surroundings also changed according to Feng Xingjian's thoughts, turning into many curved lines. The entire space seemed to be contracting and contracting, going through a strange change. My virtual image shouldn't just be the sword realm's powers. It should also be infused with the various changes of the heart sword path. Once I start attacking, I won't just be attacking the enemy externally. I'll also be killing the opponent's will and spirit. As Feng Xingjian pondered, a gush of darkness gradually encompassed the entire secret training room, and he slowly sank into the conception of his virtual image. On the other side, one of Feng Xingjian's clones crossed the horizon and arrived at a stretch of desert in the eastern sand region in the blink of an eye. There were many knights and conferred knights stationed in the surroundings of the desert. They were guarding the place, preventing anyone from entering the forbidden grounds. This was one of the 7 forbidden grounds where the Quanji 7 people were sealed. It had been sealed off under Fang Xingjian's orders. However, although several conferred knights had been sent to lead teams to seal off the area, they were unable to stop countless adventurers from coming in, hoping to try their luck and see if there were any treasures left behind by the Divine Sun Emperor. Over the past half a month, over several thousand experts at or above the knight level had rushed over. Most of them were stopped by the Empire's knights, but a small portion of them managed to enter. The reason why Fang Xingjian had come here was to investigate the situation of the Quanji 7 people being sealed. Arriving in the sky above the forbidden grounds, his marshal will scanned out slightly before landing in a campsite. It was where the Empire's knights were stationed. In the largest tent in the campsite, Wang Tiangang sat cross-legged. Several tens of streams of white aura gushed out from his mouth time and time again as he breathed, gushing toward the long sword floating before him. He was currently refining his divine weapon, using his cultivation to strengthen the longsword's quality. This was also a technique that had been passed down in the Wang clan. 1 year ago, Wang Tiangang had still been a student in the Great Western Region Regional Academy and a level 26 conferred knight. However, with the world's metamorphosis, his abilities had soared tremendously, and he had even passed through several stages to reach the demigod realm. Compared to ordinary knights, he could already be considered a genius. Just then, a light shadow flashed before his eyes. Fang Xingjian had descended. Wang Tiangang opened his eyes abruptly. Just as he was about to activate the powers in his body, he recognized Fang Xingjian, Imperial Preceptor. Wang Tiangang was stunned for a moment before he stood up rapidly, bowed, cupped his hands, and said, "Sir, what instructions do you have for me?" His attitude was respectful and humble. However, when he looked at Fang Xingjian, there was a hint of complicated emotions hidden in the depths of his gaze. 1.5 years ago, almost 2 years ago, he had still been a student ranked 9th in the Great Western Region Regional Academy. Back then, Fang Xingjian had just become a conferred knight and was merely an ant-like character in his eyes. He had even sent Zhou Xingwen to look for Fang Xingjian to negotiate, wanting to buy Fang Xingjian's right to cultivate in the sacred land. However, right now, Fang Xingjian had become a major character that he could only look at but not reach. He was a target that he would never be able to catch up to in his lifetime. Chapter 973. Although he felt a little emotional, Wang Tiangang adjusted his state of mind very quickly. After Fang Xingjian became a target that they would never be able to surpass, he also became their greatest backer and thigh. It could be said that because of Fang Xingjian's existence, the Great Western Region Regional Academies conferred knights and knights took up half of the positions in the Empire's military and political system. Wang Tiangang himself also benefited from this and gained a very lucrative position in the Eastern Sand region. He had over 30 conferred knights under him, and each and every one of his actions could determine the rise and fall of countless clans in the Eastern Sand region. It could be said that the authority he had now was something that he would never have imagined in the past. And the source of all this was this man before him. Thinking of this, he bent his back even more humbly. "Sir, if you have any instructions, I'll send someone to do it immediately. There's no need to trouble others. I'll be leaving in a while." Fang Xingjian shook his head and scanned Wang Tiangang's body with his martial will. He said calmly, "Demigod with 1 tier of perfection? Not bad. It's all thanks to Sir's nurturing," Wang Tiangang said respectfully. Fang Xingjian flicked his fingers slightly, and a stream of blood-red light gushed into the treasured sword that Wang Tiangang had just refined. It was a level 29 superior divine weapon, but after receiving the reinforcement from this stream of blood-red light, it started to tremble intensely. Waves of divine level martial will appeared faintly. Seeing this, how could Wang Tiangang not know that Fang Xingjian had the intention to help him? He immediately half knelt down and said happily, "Sir, thank you for granting me this. It's just something I did along the way," Fang Xingjian said calmly. "Over the past half a month, how many people have entered the forbidden area?" Wang Tiangang did not dare to hide anything and said directly, Most of the wild knights from the factions have been blocked outside by us. However, some officials from the imperial capital have also entered. There are also some demigods whose cultivation is too high. Although they did not enter openly out of fear of Sir's reputation, they probably performed their stealth arts and went in to take a look. I estimate that about 30 people have entered the forbidden area. There are countless strange people in this world. Some of them have higher cultivation bases than you and are skilled in stealth techniques. I don't blame you for not noticing them or for not being able to stop them. Fang Xingjian nodded and asked with a frown, but I've already given the order to forbid anyone from entering. Who's from the imperial capital? Whose orders are they serving? Hearing Fang Xingjian's words, Wang Tiangong's face instantly turned extremely pale. He dropped to his knees, his head touching the ground as he said anxiously, It's the few lords from the East Military Execution Order. They said that they're here to investigate the situation in the Forbidden Ground on the orders of the Execution Master. Hearing Wang Tiangong's words, Fang Xingjian let out a cold laugh and did not reply. He merely thought to himself, to think that there are already signs of corruption in the upper echelons, even though I've only ruled over the empire for a short period of time. It's time for me to kill a batch of people when I return this time around. Otherwise, some people will really think that they can do whatever they want. Wang Tiangang dropped to his knees, trembling. After answering a few more questions from Fang Xingjian regarding the situation in the Forbidden Ground, he did not receive a reply from Fang Xingjian even after a very long time had passed. It was only after over 10 minutes that Wang Tiangang slowly got up, but there was no sign of Fang Xingjian. Fang Xingjian's body flashed a few times, and he entered the forbidden area, arriving in a valley in the center of the forbidden area. Based on the rumors in the world, this was the place where the treasures were kept. Based on the information provided by the immortal child, this was the place where one of the Quanji 7, the demon known as Yuzi, was sealed. Scanning the entire valley with his martial will, Fang Xingjian's brows twitched slightly. What a strong stench of blood. Based on what Wang Tiangang said, there shouldn't be such a serious fight here. At the thought of this, Fang Xingjian took a step forward and entered the spatial gaps. It was as if he had become an invisible existence, instantly sinking into the underground of the valley. Through his martial will senses, he could sense that there was a huge hole 10 meters underground in this valley. It should be the place where the demon was sealed. Passing through the spatial gaps and across the rocky soil layer, endless darkness swept past. Fang Xingjian's vision suddenly lit up, and he appeared in an underground palace. In an instant, a stench of blood gushed out. Fang Xingjian's countenance was a little grim as he looked at the corpses under his feet. From what he could see, there were only 30 people. The number of people who had barged into this underground palace had probably far surpassed Wang Tiangong's estimation. However, those who had the ability to barge into this place were naturally people that Wang Tiangang would not be able to discover. Therefore, even if they were to go missing, who would know that they had died in this underground palace, which was 10 meters underground? That's not right. Fang Xingjian lowered his head and scanned the corpses under his feet. His brows furrowed. Many of these corpses are just knights. Moreover, no matter how weak Wang Tiangang is, he still possesses the abilities of a demigod. In order to escape his senses and barge into this underground palace, one must at least have the abilities of a demigod. At the thought of this, Fang Xingjian understood that something was wrong with the situation. Therefore, with a single thought, he leaped out from the spatial gaps and headed into the depths of the underground palace along the corridor. There's no hostility. There's no sudden inspiration either. Even so, they didn't discover me. Or have they already left? Fang Xingjian's gaze swept past the stone slabs in the underground palace, and he thought, it's just as what the immortal child said. In order to seal the demon and prevent the martial will from coming out, they used demonic metal, which can prevent the martial will from coming out. His palm gently stroked the stone slabs under his feet and the walls beside him. They were all made from demonic metal, and Fang Xingjian had a slight understanding of the composition of these materials. It's a material similar to the heaven-connecting upper extremity sword physique. It's no wonder that it can protect against radiation and electromagnetic waves. It can also prevent the detection of martial will. Was it forged by Saint Adam? With such a great amount, then his energy reserves and control over the microscopic world. Just from the materials of the underground palace, Feng Xingjian could already sense how great Saint Adam's cultivation had been 1,000 years ago. Even he would not be able to use his martial will to scan the entire area without resorting to violent means to change the structure of this place. He could only walk over step by step. Therefore, as he walked on, he discovered traces of massacres everywhere. Countless knights and conferred knights had been engaged in a massacre in this underground palace. They seemed to have forgotten their purpose for coming here. Even until the moment of their deaths, their faces were still filled with madness. Feng Xingjian squatted down and touched the body of a conferred knight with one hand. The essence, energy, and ether particles in the body had all been completely drawn out. The entire corpse had almost become an empty shell. The bones which could have been used to forge superior divine weapons were now no different from the bones of ordinary people. Making use of the massacres to draw out the powers of these conferred knights, Feng Xingjian's gaze flickered slightly, and he suddenly lifted his head to look at the corridor before him. Someone's coming? Chapter 974. In the pitch-black corridor, Maria sprinted at high speed. Her legs formed a series of afterimages, and her speed was already extremely fast. Beside her, 3 young men were drenched in blood. Their eyes were filled with fear as they chased after Maria with all their might. It was as if there was a super ferocious beast chasing after them. "What should we do?" one of the black-haired and black-eyed young men exclaimed. "He's catching up. Damn it. How we get out of here?" Another green-haired young man said with a broken expression. At this moment, the last golden-haired youth suddenly stopped in his tracks and gasped for breath. Maria and the others also stopped and shouted, "Are you crazy? Why aren't you running?" The golden-haired young man laughed hysterically. "Why should we run? We can't escape at all. I'm not running anymore. The result is death anyway. What's the difference if I die earlier or later?" With that, he lay down on the ground with a thud, as if he had made up his mind not to run. Maria and the other 2 young men looked at each other and ran again without saying a word. They could only hear the violent panting of the golden-haired young man getting further and further away from them. In the next moment, a blood-curdling scream rang out. The scream was filled with resentment and fear. Then, it suddenly disappeared, as if something had forcefully interrupted the sound. The 3 of them were shocked when they heard the scream. They looked at each other and seemed to see the fear in each other's eyes. Silently, the 3 of them quickened their pace again. They heard the sound of air flowing. In the empty and dark corridor, there was only the sound of the wind and footsteps. At the next moment, the 3 of them saw a man with a faint white light appearing in front of them. "Who is it?" The green-haired young man frowned. Without waiting for the other party to answer, he had already punched out with a thunderbolt toward the man's face. "No!" Maria shouted, but it was too late to stop him. Just as the green-haired youth's fist was about to hit the other party's face, his entire body had already stopped in mid-air, as if he had been frozen by an invisible force. His entire face was red, but he still could not move at all. A look of surprise flashed across the other black-haired youth's face. "Senior, please show mercy." Luoku was just too nervous and couldn't help but attack. The man in front of them was naturally Feng Xingjian. He swept his gaze across the 3 people before him and suddenly looked at Maria, who seemed to want to say something but was hesitant to do so. He asked calmly, "You know me?" Maria nodded slightly. Of course, she knew him. Close to 1 year ago, she and her father had gone to the Myriad Star Mountain to learn from a master. However, they had coincidentally encountered Feng Xingjian, who had come to challenge the astral ancestor. He even asked her if she wanted to be his disciple. It was a pity that back then, Maria had been too young and had rejected this great opportunity. Later on, as Feng Xingjian's reputation grew and even shook the southern region, defeating Alexander, the Heavenly Lion King, and many other experts, Maria came to understand what she had missed out on. Over the past 1 year, she had also been cultivating hard on the Myriad Star Mountain and had improved tremendously. However, every time she thought of how she had had the chance to be Feng Xingjian's disciple, she would feel extremely regretful. Although Feng Xingjian had not been able to recognize her at the start, after searching through his memories, he was able to recognize her. Maria? Feng Xingjian pondered for a moment and instantly understood what was going on. Back then, he had sensed from his sudden inspiration that she might be of some use to him. By the looks of it, if he were to take in Maria as his disciple, he might be able to discover the problem with the seal in advance. However, these things were just trivial matters to him. He went through them in his mind and stopped thinking about them. Instead, he looked at Maria and asked, "How long have you guys been here? Tell me everything that happened. Don't miss out on any details." The black-haired young man would occasionally turn his head and look at the black corridor behind him. It was as if there was something terrifying hidden there. His face was filled with anxiety and nervousness. When he heard Feng Xingjian's words, he said anxiously, "There's no time. He's chasing after us. Let's talk as we move." Him? Feng Xingjian looked in the direction of the corridor behind the black-haired young man and asked, "What is he? He'll eat us up." The black-haired young man's expression became increasingly anxious as he spoke rapidly. "Senior, listen to me. Let go of Locke first. We'll talk as we escape. Otherwise, we'll really be eaten up by him." However, a curious smile appeared on Feng Xingjian's face. "Is he very powerful?" When the black-haired young man saw how calm Feng Xingjian was, he felt that Feng Xingjian did not know how powerful the situation was. The black-haired young man was so anxious that he kept on going in circles. He said quickly, "Everyone here was killed by him. There's no lack of top-notch conferred knights and demigods among them. He's chasing after us right now. We must escape immediately." "Oh," Feng Xingjian asked, "then how did you guys manage to survive until now?" "I don't know." The black-haired young man became a little impatient. He stared at Feng Xingjian and said, "If you don't wish to die, then quickly let go of Locke. If you don't leave now, all of us will die. Don't worry. With me around, none of you will die," Feng Xingjian said calmly. However, the black-haired young man seemed to be extremely nervous and anxious. When a roar rang out from the corridor behind him, he was like a frightened kitten. He stomped fiercely on the ground, and with an explosive bang, he shot out like a cannonball. He wanted to give up on everyone present and dash out from behind Feng Xingjian. However, just as he was about to dash past Feng Xingjian's back, his body paused for a moment and then froze in midair. His entire body was trembling, and each of his muscles was doing their best to contract and explode. However, it was impossible for him to break free from Feng Xingjian's restraints. "Let go of me. If you guys want to die, don't implicate me." Naturally, Feng Xingjian could not care less about his will. With a wave of his hand, Maria and the other two young men floated behind him. He turned to look at the pitch-black and bottomless corridor, and a hint of a smile curled up the corners of his lips. "What the hell is this?" Accompanied by a series of low roars, a strange-looking fish slowly crawled out from the darkness. It was a badly mutilated fish that seemed to be formed from the broken limbs of countless people. Over 10 human limbs grew out from its lower body, allowing it to crawl on the ground. Its huge mouth opened and closed unconsciously, releasing a series of low roars. Its huge and lifeless eyes stared left and right at both sides of the corridor like two large light bulbs. Under its head, one could faintly see human tissues rising and falling, as if forming a part of its body. There were even many ordinary black carps, goldfish, and the like poking out from the surface of its body. Anyone who saw the appearance of this strange fish would only have one thought in their mind. This was a monster that should not have appeared in this world. As the fish appeared, everyone present felt a hint of evil, fear, and horror. It was as if countless caterpillars were crawling up their spines. Chapter 975. Looking at this ghostly thing, even Feng Xingjian could not help but frown. Behind him, Maria and the other two wore expressions of uncontrollable terror. This was especially so for the black-haired and green-haired young men. Their faces flushed red, and their muscles contracted intensely as they scolded. "Let us go. Damn it. We're all going to die because of you. Run, you idiot." Maria was the only one who maintained a hint of calmness. It was because she had already recognized Fang Xingjian's identity. Although she did not know that Fang Xingjian had already attained a breakthrough to Tier 6 of the divine level, she still had great confidence in Fang Xingjian's prowess. At this moment, when the strange fish saw Fang Xingjian, it let out a series of roars, and many human faces appeared on its back. It was as if countless people were bellowing furiously, crying out agonizingly, cursing and crying. This terrifying and disgusting scene would cause anyone who saw this scene to feel goosebumps. It was only then that Fang Xingjian realized that the sounds that the strange fish had let out earlier were not roars. Instead, these human faces were shouting out from within its body, and the sounds were coming out from its mouth after passing through its body. The strange fish's appearance became increasingly savage, as if it was the embodiment of all evil, emitting endless evilness. Looking at the monster before him, Fang Xingjian frowned. He could not help but feel a hint of disgust and irritation. However, the moment this feeling appeared, he immediately reacted. To think that it can cause my emotions to fluctuate? Fang Xingjian's gaze flickered, and black sword marks appeared on the strange fish's body. Countless black sword marks instantly engulfed the strange fish's body, as if wanting to slice it into several hundred pieces in an instant. The pure black sword marks suddenly appeared like a crack in space. The black nothingness exuded a destructive aura. The two youths looked at the sword mark in front of them and felt a suffocating sword while gushing towards them. It caused their thoughts to stop and their minds to go blank. However, after the series of slashes from the sword mark disappeared from the space in front of him, the strange fish appeared in its original position unscathed. Then, with a move of his body, he pounced towards Fang Xingjian. Fang Xingjian was slightly surprised. He had not expected his sword mark to be ineffective against this monster. However, he was a Tier 6 divine level expert after all. The instant the sword marks were ineffective, he reacted, and countless possibilities flashed through his mind. If the sword mark couldn't do anything, then it was either an existence that transcended time and space, or, in the next moment, a black sword mark suddenly appeared in front of Fang Xingjian. Accompanied by a series of shrill cries, the strange fish before him suddenly disappeared without a trace. The attacks that landed on the fish monster's body were useless. However, the attacks that landed on the air caused the fish monster to disappear. Seeing this, Maria and the others revealed looks of surprise. "What's going on?" Maria asked. "Is that monster an illusion? Is his real body hiding in another place?" Fang Xingjian said calmly, "The strange fish is an illusion. However, his real body isn't considered to be invisible either." In Fang Xingjian's senses, the so-called strange fish was merely a visual signal given by the other party. The monster in this underground palace actually existed in a form of waves, hiding in the hearts and air of ordinary people. It could be said that such means were already close to the legendary heavenly demon and heart demon. This should be the means of the Quanji 7 people, turning into the heart demon hidden in the hearts of people. It has a myriad of transformations and is traceless and formless, as expected of a Tier 6 divine level technique. Fang Xingjian thought, it's impossible for people below the divine level to detect such means. Those above the divine level must also be proficient in illusory arts and electromagnetic waves in order to be able to kill them. As he thought about this, Fang Xingjian waved his hand, and a metal wall rose up from under his feet, isolating him from the underground palace behind him. "Stay here and don't move. I'll go after that monster. When I'm back, tell me everything you've encountered." As they spoke, the metal wall split the underground palace's corridor into two. Maria and the other two also lost sight of Fang Xingjian. The black-haired young man looked at this scene in astonishment and said in a daze, "We're saved." The other green-haired young man said, What on earth is going on? Who on earth is that person? To think that he's able to go up against the monster in this underground palace. Maria said calmly, "That's Lord Feng Xingjian. With him around, the monsters in this underground palace are nothing." To think that it's Lord Sword Overlord? Hearing Maria's words, the two young men were taken aback. A hint of astonishment and excitement appeared in their eyes. After Feng Xingjian sealed off the path of retreat, he continued to walk down the underground palace's corridor as if he was taking a leisurely stroll in the park. Feng Xingjian's opponent was the voice of the heart demon, which was invisible and formless. Ordinary means would not be able to detect it, especially when it could move at light speed. This meant that one would forever only be able to see the past image of the heart demon, and would not be able to see the current moment. This was because most investigative means relied on the reflection of various waves at light speed to sense the target. However, if the other party were to move at light speed, it would be impossible for one to be able to detect the other party at this moment. Therefore, Feng Xingjian was not in a hurry. He merely took one step at a time, crossing a distance of several hundred meters with each step he took. With each step he took, a metal wall rose up from the ground, isolating the underground palace's passageway. Feng Xingjian slowly reduced the living space the other party had. Although this heart demon is invisible and can even affect the thoughts of others, it doesn't have the ability to interfere with the physical world. These corpses on the ground seem to have been possessed by this heart demon and then died from internal strife. After taking a few steps, Feng Xingjian realized that something was wrong. The size of the underground palace far surpassed the area he should have. Has the size of the space been changed? It seems that the demon here has really managed to escape. The structure of the underground palace had clearly been stretched and changed by an expert. The initially simple underground palace had become a massive structure that was densely packed like a beehive. This made it convenient for the heart demon to wreak havoc in the crowd. I wonder who was the one who moved this space. By the looks of it, these knights in the underground palace were also thrown in by this person. Otherwise, it would be impossible for ordinary knights to enter such a deep underground place. However, Feng Xingjian was not surprised. When he encountered a fork in the road, he would split into two. When he encountered another fork in the road, he would split again. Very soon, he had explored the entire underground palace with several thousand clones, forcing the heart demon into a dead end. Roar. With a roar of unwillingness, the strange fish shattered and dissipated into the air. However, very soon, Feng Xingjian's body was covered by countless proteins. Many dead fish darted out from under his skin with their eyes wide open. You still dare to wreak havoc. With an explosive bang, an agonizing cry seemed to ring out in void space, and the strange phenomenon before him disappeared completely. Chapter 976. Feng Xingjian frowned, but he was slowly savoring the aftershock from the waves. He thought, it seems that this demon has already broken free. He has no rationality, no thoughts, and even no memories. To think that this mental demon monster is just a remnant thought wave? Looking at the countless corpses in the underground palace, Feng Xingjian could not help but think of the word's remarkable abilities. To be able to create such a terrifying scene with just a hint of remnant thought. If this mental demon were to break free from its seal, there would probably be no one in the entire Eastern Sand region who would be able to deal with it. It would be like a natural disaster. Just a hint of a thought is enough to bring chaos to the world. It seemed that the remarkable abilities of the Quanji 7 people were above his initial estimations. Simultaneously, in a small world that was independent from Miracle World, a priest opened his eyes abruptly. Fatso, my mental demon has been wiped out. This Taoist had the head of a fish and the body of a human, just like the legendary half-mermaids and half-mermaids. His big eyes glowed like pearls, and he was wearing a Taoist robe, giving off an indescribably absurd and weird feeling. Just as he said this, hints of black cheese appeared in the surroundings, forming a blurry image of the fat priest. He said, "Oh, who discovered the forbidden ground?" Priest, you frowned slightly, pinched his fingers together, and said, "There's an expert who performed a technique that transcends space-time. I can't divine it. My mental demon has no intelligence, and it even traversed across 2 realms. It's impossible for me to transmit any information back." As expected, there's an expert? The fat priest fell silent for a moment before saying, "Since that's the case, then it's not good for us to expose ourselves. Get the others to withdraw their setups in the forbidden ground." The fat priest knew very well of Yuzi's attainments. He was originally a ferocious beast reared by an expert from the demon sect. He had the remarkable ability of turning into a mental demon and being invisible and formless. After attaining Tier 6 of the divine level, he cultivated the demon sect's heavenly demon transformation technique, allowing him to exist between existence and non-existence. After he split out a hint of mental demon, his senses toward the unseen world were especially accurate. If even the other party was unable to sense anything, it would mean that the enemy's means had already surpassed the limits of space-time. The enemy was in existence at Tier 6 of the divine level or above. "Taoist," you said coldly, "don't we need to kill him? Since he has discovered that there is a problem with one forbidden area, he will definitely check the other forbidden areas. We can set up a trap and kill him in one go. It has been less than 2 years since the world's metamorphosis took place. Even if there are Tier 6 divine level existences, there won't be more than 5 of them." The fat Taoist frowned and thought for a while, then shook his head and said, "That's not appropriate. Since the other party had broken through your heart demon intent, he must have known how powerful it was. If he were to explore the forbidden land again, he would naturally be prepared. It was impossible for his main body to rush over. At our level, killing 1 or 2 clones or demonic consciousnesses is meaningless. For now, it's better to hide completely and wait for the Divine Treasure's meeting to release His Highness the Prince." Hearing the prince's name, a hint of awe flashed across Taoist Fish's eyes. "That's right. If His Highness Prince can break free, the continent will be under his control. It's just that it's a shame that Pope Yi Bei and Saint Adam laid down such a vicious formation. Otherwise, with the prince's magical powers, he would have escaped long ago." After Fang Xingjian broke through Yuzi's heart demon intent, he grabbed hold of Maria and the other 2 and left the underground palace. He then asked them about the situation in the underground palace in detail. After listening to the trio's narration, Fang Xingjian nodded and thought, "It's just as I thought. Someone is feeding this demon outside, luring in an outsider to break the seal. Is this person one of the other Quanji 7 people, or is someone helping them? After destroying this heart demon, the other party might have already sensed my existence." Various thoughts flashed in Fang Xingjian's eyes, and another 6 clones darted out from his body. They soared into the sky and flew toward the other 6 forbidden areas in the continent. Although the other party might have sensed his earlier actions, and the Quanji 7 people might have already escaped, Fang Xingjian still had to ascertain the situation in the various forbidden areas no matter what. There's still the Divine Treasures meeting. Back then, the Quanji 7 people came to Miracle World in search of the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures. Then could the Divine Treasures, meeting this time around, be related to them? Just as Fang Xingjian was thinking about this, the other 6 clones quickly arrived at the remaining 6 forbidden areas at light speed. Before him, the 2 young men dropped to their knees abruptly and shouted, "Lord Sword Overlord, please take us in as your disciples." They stared at Fang Xingjian, their gazes filled with burning passion and anticipation. The Sword Overlord was the #1 expert in the south of the continent, and he seemed to be on par with the 3 saints in the north. If they could take him as their master, their future would be bright. Not only would they be able to become conferred knights, demigods, or even divine-level experts. However, Fang Xingjian merely threw a cold glance at the 2 of them. "You violated the rules and barged into the forbidden areas without permission. Now that you've been saved by me, you're already thinking of taking me as your master? Preposterous." After being swept by Fang Xingjian's gaze, the 2 of them were taken aback. They felt as if a great terror had descended from the sky, and they could not help but start to tremble. In the end, they let out a cry and started to escape. Useless. Feng Xingjian lifted his head and looked at Maria, who was gritting her teeth with a pale countenance. Under the terror and pressure from her heart-sword path, the other party forced herself to hold on and did not escape. Looking at her expectant gaze, Feng Xingjian said calmly, "You do have some talent." Sensing the connection from his sudden inspiration that had yet to dissipate, Feng Xingjian gave it some thought and sent a stream of sword light gushing into her consciousness. If you're able to reach the maximum level of this prodigious demolition sword physique within 3 months, come and look for me in the imperial capital, in a pure white city in the north of the continent. All the buildings in the entire city were either covered in white paint or built from blocks of white jade-like rocks. The entire city seemed to be emitting a dazzling white glow under the sun's illumination, exuding a sacred aura. The city before them was one of the holy cities of the Holy See of Truth in the north, Augusta City. It was also where the Holy See of Truth's Holy Text Institute was located, a place of worship for countless believers, and the Immortal Child's base camp. Every day, countless believers would come here to discuss doctrines, research history, and interpret the wonders of the God of Truth. Right now, the Immortal Child was sitting cross-legged in an ordinary small house, and the white Emperor Zenith's sword was floating quietly before him. Occasionally, one could see floating runes passing between the two of them. "How is it, Urbian? Can you cultivate divine arts?" The Immortal Child asked with some anticipation. Urbian's voice rang out from the white Emperor Zenith's sword. "Do you think that I'll believe in the God of Truth?" Thinking of how Feng Xingjian's power and will have been engulfed by the God of Truth, the Immortal Child smiled and shrugged. "Don't be so vengeful." However, Urbian continued, "Divine arts and sorcery are ultimately powers that others have bestowed upon you. If you wish to reach true heights or even break through the limits of the divine level, it's better that you don't use such things as much." The Immortal Child asked curiously, "Then you're cultivating martial arts? How's your cultivation going? Do you want me to bring you to the sacred land to go through a job transition?" Urbian said calmly, "Job transition is just a form. It's still inseparable from the demonic god's guidance. If I wish to level up, I could do so anytime and anywhere. The changes in space won't affect me." Just then, Urbian's voice paused for a moment before he continued. "Feng Xingjian is here? If there's nothing important, he wouldn't come here. Moreover, you guys have already reached Tier 6 of the divine level and are already the pinnacle existences in this land. It seems that either those few mage kings, who we don't know of, have made a move, or something has happened to the Quanji 7 people. The commander is right." Feng Xingjian's figure slowly stepped out from the spatial gaps. He looked at the Immortal Child and said solemnly, "I wonder if the saint has checked, but I've taken a look at the 7 seals of the Quanji 7 people. All of them are gone." Chapter 977. Hearing Feng Xingjian's words, the Immortal Child's gaze immediately narrowed, and he said, "What? All 7 seals have been broken?" He stood up, and a hint of nervousness flashed on his face. "This is troublesome. These 7 people were already at Tier 6 of the Divine, level 1,000 years ago. Although 1,000 years have passed, and most of their powers have been converted into lifespan, Tier 6 of the Divine level is still Tier 6 of the Divine level after all. 7 of them. This is going to be difficult. No matter how weak the other party's powers were, they were at least at Tier 6 of the Divine level. Moreover, there were a total of 7 of them. Just the thought of this number made the Immortal Child's heart palpitate. Since they've broken free, why haven't they done anything? The Immortal Child frowned and said, "Moreover, we didn't discover them with our sudden inspiration either. They're probably hiding in some small world and have broken away from the main world's timeline," Feng Xingjian said. "The crux is what they want to do." The Immortal Child's gaze lit up slightly. "You're talking about the Divine Treasures meeting? This is the only thing I can think of right now." Feng Xingjian analyzed. The target of the 7 Sons' arrival 1,000 years ago was the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures. Previously, someone released news and exposed the place where the seven suns were sealed. It was also in the name of the Divine Sun Emperor. Right now, they're holding the Divine Treasures meeting in the name of the Divine Sun Emperor. It's hard to believe that there's no relationship between the two. So, the problem now is the planes? The immortal child stroked his chin and said, "Then there are a few things that we need to do now. One is to investigate the situation of the Steel Lion Kingdom in the plains and see if the seven suns are controlling them from behind. The second is to look for allies. The threat of 7 Tier 6 divine level experts is too great. We must find some additional allies to deal with them together. The third is to hide the news that we've reached Tier 6 of the divine level. Only then will we be able to be of use during critical moments. Right now, they're in the open while we're in the dark. This is our advantage. When I was investigating the forbidden area, I had a fight with them. They've probably discovered me, but they probably don't know who I am," Fong Xingjian said. "As for the grasslands, I've already sent a clone over to investigate." The immortal child said, "That's good. They definitely don't know about us yet. In that case, I'll look for the Extraordinary Sun and Seiko Kaitian first, and see if I can join forces with them." Fong Xingjian said calmly, "I will contact the people from the Sorcerer Association." Hearing Fong Xingjian's words, the immortal child was slightly stunned. Then, he took a deep look at Fong Xingjian and said, "Rumor has it that you have colluded with the Sorcerer Association. It seems like it's true." Although the Holy See of Truth and the Sorcerer Association had been at odds for countless years, at the immortal child's level, he would naturally not be so stubborn about his beliefs. However, he still shook his head and said, "It's fine for you to contact the people from the Sorcerer Association, but don't let others find out about your relationship. If others find out, it'll be very troublesome. Even I won't be able to speak up for you." "I understand. Even if they come, they'll only take action in the dark this time around," Fong Xingjian said, nodding. "But there's still a problem. How do we win against them?" Fong Xingjian said, "There are 7 Tier 6 divine level experts. Our previous arrangements can only help us build up some advantages. It's still not safe enough if we want to win against them." As the two of them spoke, they turned their gazes toward the white Emperor Zenith sword and Urbian, who was on it. Urbian closed his eyes and said calmly, "If their standards are the same as the immortal child's, then I'll be able to deal with about 3 to 5 of them. I'll still have to look at the direction of their abilities before I can make an accurate calculation." Hearing Urbian's analogy, the immortal child did not know whether to laugh or cry. He looked at Urbian and said, "They've been trapped for 1,000 years and have lost a lot of their powers. They shouldn't be as powerful as I am now. The crux is that we still don't know their current conditions." Fong Xingjian frowned and said, "The best way is to investigate their situation and also to increase our battle prowess once again within 1 month. We'll increase it as much as we can." As he spoke, he looked toward Urbian and said, "For the time being, other than our clones, the 3 of us will enter seclusion to cultivate and research the virtual image." Urbian nodded. All right. It was true that his current potential was the highest out of the 3 of them. It was because both Fong Xingjian and the immortal child had reached Tier 6 of the divine level. Other than possessing the white Emperor Zenith sword, Fong Xingjian had not cultivated any other powers. Therefore, if he were to really start cultivating, his improvement would definitely be the greatest. However, Fong Xingjian let out a soft sigh inwardly. There was actually a better method, which was for the 3 of them to join forces and think of a way to kill the other 2 saints. With the 3 swords combined into one, they would be able to obtain the true White Emperor Zenith sword with 21 sections. It was a pity that the lives of the 2 saints were the foundation of the alliance between Fong Xingjian and the immortal child. Once the other 2 were killed, the ownership of the 2 White Emperor Zenith swords would be a huge problem. By then, Fong Xingjian and the immortal child would no longer be bound by the oath. Moreover, Urbian would have already integrated with a portion of the White Emperor Zenith sword. There would still be reservations between Fong Xingjian and the immortal child. It It was just like how Feng Xingjian would not hand over the remaining 5 levels of the mystical prince to the immortal child. With the latter's current cultivation and Urbian's help, if the latter were to hand over the remaining 5 levels of the mystical prince, then even Feng Xingjian would not be able to stop him. It was the same for the Mage Association. Although the Quanji 7 people were extremely powerful, they had yet to reach the stage where they could truly threaten everyone and get all the top-notch experts in the world to cast aside their differences and join forces. The immortal child continued, "All right, since that's the case, we'll enter seclusion together before the start of the Divine Treasures meeting and discuss Tao. With the 3 of us combined, we'll definitely be able to develop an extremely powerful virtual image." While Feng Xingjian was communicating with the immortal child, one of his clones had already arrived on the plains. As a stream of sword light cut across the sky, Feng Xingjian arrived above the Steel Lion Kingdom's palace. At the next moment, his body suddenly dissipated, turning into a breeze that swept across the land. At Tier 6 of the divine level, the form of one's conjured physique no longer mattered. Regardless of whether it was wind, rain, thunder, or lightning, or human or beast forms, they could all be Feng Xingjian's forms. Right now, Feng Xingjian had turned into a breeze and scanned through the entire palace within a few minutes. However, he did not find any traces of Tier 6 divine level experts. Chapter 978. Feng Xingjian then spent another 3 hours searching through the entire city in detail. However, he still did not discover any signs of the existence of Tier 6 divine level experts. As expected, they're not around? Are the Quanji 7 people not behind Duan Tianhao? Or could it be that they've deliberately hidden themselves? Feng Xingjian gave it some thought, and then a light breeze swept toward a study in the palace's northeast. Right now, Duan Tianhao was sitting behind a desk in the study, holding a book in his hands and reading it in detail. It was the information regarding the current situation in the plains and the empire. A light breeze blew into the study unknowingly, flipping through the documents on the desk. Duan Tianhao raised his head to take a look, frowned, and observed carefully again. After ascertaining that there were no abnormalities, his thoughts sank into the information before him again. The contents displayed were the recent military movements within the empire, the situation of the various demigods and above, and even some secret information regarding the imperial capital's palace. All of these had been leaked out. This was naturally because Duan Tianhao had taken over the Heavenly Lion King's information channel. This was why he had been able to obtain so much information. Looking at the current situation in the world, the corners of Duan Tianhao's lips curled up into a cold smile as he thought, "Humph, are you still circling around the forbidden grounds? Do you think that it'll be useful just because you're not allowed to enter? But how can masters means be something that you can imagine? Feng Xingjian, you probably won't even be able to imagine that the 6 old ancestors have already broken free a long time ago. Once the last old ancestor breaks free as well." Humph, humph. He then looked at the attitudes of the various major influences toward the Divine Treasures meeting. Neither the Mage Association nor the Holy Sea of Truth gave an official reply. Looking at the attitudes of these 2 top-notch influences, Duan Tianhao's eyes narrowed slightly. The strongest influences in the world. In another month's time, it won't be the same anymore. Although these 2 influences haven't replied, with their backgrounds, they'll naturally know what the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures represent. When the time comes, they'll still send people over. Duan Tianhao continued reading. Regardless of whether it was the various countries in the north, the various barbarian tribes, or the top-notch martial factions, almost all of them had agreed to participate in the Divine Treasures meeting. There were even many small sects and sects that were not invited, as well as a few small island countries overseas who also wanted a piece of the pie. The more he watched, the brighter the smile on Duan Tianhao's face became. Very good. The more participants, the better. When he saw the Empire's negative response, that Feng Xingjian would be personally leading a team to participate in the Divine Treasures meeting, his smile became even more radiant. As soon as he imagined the scene of Feng Xingjian coming over, He couldn't help but feel excited. Fang Xingjian, what are you laughing at? Just as Duan Tianhao was reading the report and laughing, Fang Xingjian's voice suddenly rang in his ear. Duan Tianhao abruptly raised his head and discovered that Fang Xingjian had unknowingly stood beside him, looking at him with a smile that was not a smile. Fang Xingjian. Duan Tianhao was so shocked that he stood up immediately. Why are you here? Why can't I be here? Fang Xingjian looked at Duan Tianhao and scanned his body with his martial will. He had already come to a conclusion. Tier 1 of the divine level? Then the person who pushed Tyron back is definitely not you. Someone is hiding behind you. Simultaneously, the information regarding Duan Tianhao appeared in his mind. The Four Seasons Villa's young villa lord. The villa defied the local government, sheltered criminals, seized the country's assets, committed murder, extortion, and robbery, and was wiped out. He started to flee 1 month ago, and the last time I saw him, he was at the demigod level. At the thought of this, a hint of chaotic glow suddenly flashed in Fang Xingjian's eyes as he looked at Duan Tianhao. Tell me, who helped you push Tyron back? A hint of confusion flashed in Duan Tianhao's eyes. He opened his mouth as if wanting to say something, but his body stiffened up, and he was unable to say anything. Very soon, the muscles throughout his body started to tremble incessantly. It was as if there was a gush of power in his body that was forcing him to say a single word. The chaotic glow in Fang Xingjian's eyes became even more intense. He looked at Duan Tianhao, and the martial will he emitted seemed to have turned into something material, gushing out toward Duan Tianhao's heart. However, even under the power of Fang Xingjian's heart sword path, Duan Tianhao was still unable to say a single word. Instead, his entire body trembled increasingly intensely, and hints of blood started flowing out from his eyes, nostrils, and mouth. All of his muscles started to spasm, and many green veins popped up under his skin. You're still not going to say anything? Fang Xingjian's eyes narrowed slightly. He sensed that there was an extremely vast qi activity in Duan Tianhao's will, protecting his heart sword path's attack. Clearly, this was something left behind by an expert. If I were to strengthen my attacks, I might be able to break through it, but this person would also die. At the thought of this, Fang Xingjian slowed down his attacks and did not continue to question Duan Tianhao. However, just from a means left behind in Duan Tianhao's consciousness, he could tell that there must be an expert at Tier 6 of the divine level or above standing behind Duan Tianhao. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to fend off Fang Xingjian's heart sword path. On the other hand, Duan Tianhao immediately relaxed. He felt as if his head was going to explode, and the muscles and bones throughout his body felt as if they had been run over by a truck. With a thud, he was unable to maintain his standing posture and dropped to his knees before Fang Xingjian. However, the moment he dropped to his knees, his countenance instantly turned grim. How can I kneel before Fang Xingjian? He propped himself up, want to stand up. However, he discovered that all his limbs were sore and weak, unable to exert any strength at all. Right now, he was already at his limit by using both hands to support himself from the ground so that he would not be prostrated on all fours. The state caused his eyes to spurt out flames. Sensing his weakness and helplessness before Fang Xingjian, Duan Tianhao's countenance turned increasingly grim. He said coldly, Fang Xingjian, what are you trying to do? He lifted his head with great difficulty and looked at Fang Xingjian as if he was looking at a dead person. You want to know who the person behind me is? So what if you know? They aren't people you can go up against. I'm just an ant in front of you. But aren't you also an ant in front of them? He then laughed out loud as if he could already see Fang Xingjian's tragic ending. However, Fang Xingjian thought, they don't know that I've already reached Tier 6 of the divine level. They don't even know that I've joined forces with the immortal child and discovered the existence of the Quanji 7 people. They should think that I'm here to seek revenge against Duan Tianhao for the sake of Tyrant. That's why they're still able to keep their composure. That's a good opportunity for me to spy on them. At the thought of this, Fang Xingjian threw a cold glance at Duan Tianhao. Then I'll see how long you guys can hold it in. Chapter 979. Looking at Duan Tianhao, Fang Xingjian tapped out with a finger. Piercing sword light was emitted, seeming as if even the surrounding space was going to be pierced through. Faced with Fang Xingjian's finger attack, Duan Tianhao was naturally unable to resist at all. He only felt a piercing white light before him, and tears kept on gushing out from his eyes. His skin was also filled with an intense pain, as if he was being pierced by needles. At the next moment, a feeling as if he was being sliced up by 1,000 blades came gushing forth. Countless sword wounds instantly erupted on Duan Tianhao's body, and it was as if he was going to be completely dismembered in an instant. At this moment, unprecedented terror filled Duan Tianhao's heart. The smell of death had never been so close to him before, and it caused his scalp to go numb. His heart and breathing seemed to have stopped, and he'd fallen into the deepest terror. However, just as Duan Tianhao was about to die, a sigh rang out, and a blurry figure appeared between Fang Xingjian and Duan Tianhao. That figure pressed down gently on the sword light, and everything in the world was annihilated in an instant. All of the sword light turned into darkness. The sword light dissipated, and the figure of the man was finally revealed. It was a man who was encompassed by a melancholic disposition. Dressed in black long robes and long black hair, he was like the emperor of the night. His entire person had merged into the darkness, making it hard for others to see his true appearance. Only a pair of bright eyes were extremely conspicuous in the darkness. It was a pair of melancholic eyes that seemed to be filled with pity toward all living things in the world, lamenting over life, reminiscing over the past, and worrying about the outside world. Looking at the man before him, Fang Xingjian said calmly, "You're finally willing to come out? You're the one who helped Duan Tianhao rebuild the plains? You even injured Tyrant, whom I sent." As Fang Xingjian spoke, his marshal will scan the man's body, incessantly probing his strength. Tier 5 of the divine level? Fang Xingjian thought. Is it a clone that suppresses its strength? When a man heard Fang Xingjian's question, he sighed, and his eyes seemed to be filled with endless worry. The grassland has always had its own set of rules since ancient times. Since the Imperial Preceptor has already won against the Heavenly Lion King and obtained a tremendous amount of compensation, why is there a need to be so overbearing, wanting to bring the plains under your control as well? After saying this, the man raised his head and looked straight at Fang Xingjian. His eyes seemed to be filled with love for life and pity for the world. He looked at Fang Xingjian weakly but firmly. This person was Haizi, one of the Quanji 7 people. At this moment, he was disguised as a hermit expert in the grassland to fight against Fang Xingjian. Just as Fang Xingjian was sizing up Haizi, Haizi was also sizing up Fang Xingjian. Tier 5 of the divine level, Fang Xingjian deduced inwardly, it should also be a clone. Based on the information, it's true that this Fang Xingjian is an unrivaled genius that appears once in 1,000 years. In just a short 3 to 4 years, he has turned from an ordinary apprentice to a Tier 5 divine level expert. However, he hasn't reached Tier 6 of the divine level and doesn't have a background in sorcery and divine arts. He's nothing to worry about. At the thought of this, Fang Xingjian's brows furrowed slightly. However, I can't use my Tier 6 divine level abilities to defeat this clone of his. Otherwise, it'll be troublesome if the news gets leaked and I get attacked by the Mage Association and the Holy See of Truth. At the very least, before the prince is released, I won't be able to perform my level 6 abilities. This is to avoid attracting those people's attention and even causing them to join forces once again. Haizi had deep feelings toward the hidden experts in this land. It was just like 1,000 years ago when the world had undergone a metamorphosis and experts had emerged endlessly. Back then, they had thought that with their Tier 6 divine level cultivation, they would be able to wipe out everything. It was only later that they found out that this land's heritage and background were not as simple as they seemed on the surface. Their actions had even caused those people to join forces, posing a great threat to them. They had even been sealed for 1,000 years and had only just broken free now. That sword from the church and the so-called missing pope. The few mage kings from the Mage Association who have not appeared for several decades. At the very least, before the prince breaks free, we mustn't let them know of our existence. At the thought of this, Heisey made up his mind that he must not expose his identity or his Tier 6 divine level means. Then, I'll use my Tier 5 divine level powers to defeat him. Heisey looked at Feng Xingjian. Although Feng Xingjian's aptitude was extraordinary and his rate of improvement was unbelievable, Feng Xingjian had cultivated diligently for over 1,000 years and had reached Tier 6 of the divine level 1,000 years ago. He was also proficient in the Black Sun Sect's Dark Sky Great Technique. During the 1,000 years that he had been sealed, his understanding of the Dark Sky Great Technique had surpassed that of his master in the past. He had reached the terrifying realm of being able to turn night and day with a single thought. Now that they were both at Tier 5 of the divine level, how could he possibly lose to Feng Xingjian? The only thing he needed to consider was how to hide his strength and identity as much as possible. Duan Tianhao, who was covered in blood and had almost been killed by Feng Xingjian, laughed out loud, excitedly. He looked at Heisey and could not suppress the smile on his face. Old ancestor, he's Feng Xingjian. He's the one who killed my entire clan and wiped out my mountain villa. Old ancestor, please help me take revenge today. Duan Tianhao had a deep understanding of how terrifying the Quanji 7 people were. Each of these 7 old monsters was a great demon with immeasurable powers. When each of them appeared, they would be able to astonish the world and suppress the entire world. If it was not because they were wary of some experts who were hidden in the dark, they would have massacred the world without any reservations, turning the entire world into a purgatory. Feng Xingjian, today is just the beginning, Duan Tianhao grinned. Duan Tianhao grinned. From today onwards, you can struggle with all your might, try your best to survive, and do everything you can to resist, but no matter what, you will be crushed to death like a bug in the end. After saying that, even though Duan Tianhao was in intense pain and covered in blood, he still laughed out loud. He looked at Feng Xingjian, filled with delight and hatred. A hint of pity flashed in Heisey's eyes. It was as if he was feeling pity for the sorrow of all the lives in the world. It's easy to kill this clone of his, but I mustn't reveal too many of my means. At the next moment, he closed his eyes completely. As he did so, the benevolence in his eyes disappeared completely. With the disappearance of the benevolence, the killing intent in the air increased rapidly. As Heisey closed his eyes, the entire city was encompassed in pure darkness. It was as if no light waves would be able to survive in this darkness. The Dark Sun Great Technique, Dark Shadow Country, was activated. Chapter 980. Just as Heisey closed his eyes and activated the Great Black Sun Technique, Feng Xingjian also made a move. Feng Xingjian's attack was as fast as lightning. Streams of sword marks extended out toward Heisey, as if they were tearing through space with his body as the starting point. However, the moment the sword marks came into contact with Heisey, Heisey's figure completely disappeared. It's useless. Under the Dark Shadow Country. At the next moment, a hint of astonishment flashed on the face of Heisey, who was in the sky. He saw countless black sword marks slashing onto his body, crushing his body into dust. Feng Xingjian stepped out slowly from behind him. What did you say? In the dark night, Heisey's body once again reassembled. However, his countenance was much more grim. In the Dark Shadow Country, he shouldn't be able to receive any waves or light. However, right now, Feng Xingjian did not seem to have any abnormalities. This could only mean that Feng Xingjian's control over the microscopic world was not inferior to Feng Xingjian's. A cold snort rang out, and as Heisey opened his eyes, the world once again returned to its original state. Since the Dark Shadow Country was ineffective, he would not continue performing it either. Feng Xingjian, you're really not bad. At your age, your understanding of the world has reached such a level. Probably even Saint Adam wasn't able to do this when he was your age. As Heisey spoke, he took a step forward. With each step he took, streams of black flames burned up on his body. His eyes were filled with killing intent as black flames shot out from his eye sockets. At the same time, he stretched out his palm and formed a unique hand seal. As this hand seal was formed, the black flames all over Feng Xingjian's body were suddenly attracted to the hand seal. Simultaneously, the world seemed to tremble, and all the darkness seemed to have gathered onto Heisey's hand seal. As the darkness gathered, the entire palace and the entire city seemed to have suddenly become as bright as day. There was no longer any hint of darkness. Even the shadows under one's feet had disappeared. It was as if everything and every animal within a range of 100 lis was emitting light. Absolute darkness created absolute light. It was the eternal night great palm that Heisey had activated with his pinnacle tier 5 divine level powers. A rumble rang out. The huge palm, which had turned into a stretch of pure black, slapped out fiercely toward Feng Xingjian. The explosive power seemed to want to turn everything in the world back into darkness. Heisey's series of means of controlling light and darkness and changing the world with a single thought displayed remarkable abilities, giving off a feeling of turning something rotten into something magical. Right now, the eternal night great palm imprint that was unleashed at the very end was extremely ferocious. Wherever the pure black palm imprint passed by, the great chi would turn into vacuum, and space would distort into a stretch of darkness. This was the pinnacle of techniques below tier 5 of the divine level. A single palm strike was enough to instantly tear apart the earth, shatter dozens of mountains, and turn the entire city into a bottomless pit. Duan Tianhao laughed heartily as he looked at the ink-like darkness in the sky. His eyes were filled with excitement. Faced with Heisey's pinnacle attack, which was at tier 5 of the divine level, Feng Xingjian's countenance was calm, showing neither sorrow nor joy. He merely tapped out with a finger. A black sword mark extended out from his fingertip like a black lightning. It tore through everything in its path and ruthlessly collided with the eternal night palm imprint. Compared to Heisey's eternal night great palm imprint, Feng Xingjian's sword mark was a product of the pinnacle sword arts that had condensed the light pursuit, infiltrating void, instant, and all-conquering sword intents. Even without performing spatial translocation and void sword mark, it was still a sword technique that was in no way weaker than the eternal night great palm imprint. Right now, when the two gushes of power collided, the entire sky seemed to instantly shatter. The space was distorted into countless fragments, and black spatial gaps instantly filled up the sky above the entire city. When the repercussive waves landed on the ground, they immediately tore the earth apart and shook the rocks. Over 10 huge cracks extended out from the city, shattering houses and creating valleys amidst countless people's astonished cries. An aura that seemed as if it was the end of the world came gushing out. Everyone who saw the scene of the sky and the earth being torn apart could not help but drop to their knees, prostrating themselves in the midst of this world-shaking power. Regardless of whether it was Heisey's eternal night palm or Feng Xingjian's sword mark, they were both at the pinnacle of tier 5 of the divine level in terms of technique. However, although their realms were similar, their powers differed. Heisey's powers had fallen to rock bottom after being depleted for 1,000 years of his lifespan. However, Feng Xingjian's martial will had already reached 8,500 points after receiving the reinforcement from countless heavenly and earthly treasures, divine martial arts, and secret arts. He also had the plunder from the sun, as well as the thunder-inducing techniques cultivation. Right now, the two of their clones attacked at full power, and the victor was immediately decided. An explosive rumble rang out, and under Heisey's disbelieving gaze, Feng Xingjian pressed down with a finger. The sword mark instantly tore apart the eternal night palm and charged out toward Heisey like crushing dry weeds. Too weak. Feng Xingjian looked coldly at Heisey. Then he pressed down explosively with another finger as if he was crushing an ant with one hand. Ah! Streams of black cheese were instantly torn apart, and Heisey was pressed down toward the ground as if he had turned into a broken cloth bag. With a furious bellow, black martial wool gushed out in all directions like furious tidal waves. Heisey formed seals with his hands, and his entire body started to burn amidst the black flames. Limitless light, endless night, endless longevity. Fang Xinjian, take another longevity Night Emperor fist from me. With a rumble, Heisey, whose entire body was burning up, unleashed all the powers of this clone. The black flames continued to burn, and there seemed to be many cries of vengeful spirits, giving off an endless feeling of viciousness and wickedness. If Fang Xinjian was said to be a benevolent person who bemoaned the state of the universe and pitted the fate of mankind, then at this moment, after unleashing his full powers, he instantly turned into an evil and wicked demon. As the flames burned, he was not the only one. Over 2,000 people in the entire palace let out agonizing cries at the same time, and their bodies started to burn up in the black flames. Amidst the blazing black flames, these people's appearances started to age at a rapid rate. At this moment, not only had Heisey unleashed his martial will explosively, but he had also directly robbed and burned up the lifespan of others to attack. However, such a secret technique that extracted the lifespan of others clearly could not be used for long. It could only be used for a one-time explosive attack. As the lifespan was extracted, Heisey's clone started to break down rapidly. However, the prowess of this longevity Night Emperor fist was truly tremendous. As the clone's lifespan was depleted, a majestic and indescribable mysterious power gathered in Heisey's hand seals. As he let out an explosive bellow, it pressed out toward Fang Xinjian's sword fingers. At the sight of this attack, Fang Xinjian also revealed a hint of surprise. However, how could he be afraid of Fang Xinjian when it came to a competition of strength? At the next moment, streams of black sword marks soared into the sky, as if wanting to turn the entire world into a sword net. With his body as the center, a myriad of black sword marks tore through space-time and attacked toward Heisey. Wherever the sword marks passed by, everything in the world would be destroyed. The world would be destroyed, and all matter in the world seemed to be unable to exist before this gush of power. The full power of the sword realm erupted, instantly engulfing Heisey along with his fist. Streams of sword marks wrapped up Heisey's clone like bandages. Right now, his face was filled with astonishment and disbelief. This is the power that a Tier 5 divine level expert can possess. Why? His realm is clearly only at Tier 5 of the divine level. Why is his martial will so powerful? At the next moment, as Fang Xinjian's finger pressed down once again, Heisey's body completely broke down and exploded, turning into countless black air currents that scattered in midair. With a cold snort, Fang Xinjian turned his gaze toward Duan Tianhao, who was in a daze. A loud rumble seemed to ring out in void space. Amidst agonizing cries, Duan Tianhao's lower body was completely crushed into a series of light spots. Meanwhile, his upper body disappeared into void space along with a wave of black cheese. In the sky, Heisey's vicious and evil voice rang out slowly. Fang Xinjian, the plains are yours. But the next time we meet, I'll definitely kill you. Chapter 981. The Plains Imperial City was in a state of chaos. Countless warriors ran out from the plains, starting to treat the injured or search for the enemies they imagined. However, the two experts who had caused all of this had disappeared a long time ago, and the black cracks in the sky also gradually shrank and disappeared. Heisey left with Duan Tianhao using the shadow evasion art. The two of them turned into shadows, darting through the shadows on the ground at high speed. In the blink of an eye, they left the Imperial City and arrived in the plains. On the plains, under the moonlight, the shadows under each patch of grass became their best protective umbrella. His eyes were filled with viciousness and evil thoughts. It was as if his previous bemoaning the state of the universe and loving life were all just a disguise. In fact, this was the cultivation method of the Black Sun sect's Black Sky Great Art. There were both light and dark intents in one's heart, cultivating with a benevolent heart and using viciousness to kill. Therefore, although he usually appeared to be a good young man who loved nature, he would not care about anyone and would resort to unscrupulous means when it came to battle. He was like a devil from hell. At the thought of how he had been forced back by a young man in his 20s despite having cultivated for over 1,000 years, he was infuriated. Damn it, to think that I failed miserably in such an easy task. Damn it, if it wasn't for the fact that I can't use my full power. Not being able to unleash Tier 6 divine level powers and thus being chased away by Feng Xingjian was what made Haizi feel the most aggrieved. Duan Tianhao, who was only left with his upper body in his hands, appeared to be in an extremely miserable state. Feng Xingjian's sword cheese had not only torn apart his lower body, but they had also invaded his internal organs, crazily wiping out his life force. If it was not because Haizi was helping him to suppress them, he would have died completely. Despite this, his countenance was already pale, and he was covered in blood. It seemed like he was breathing in more than he was exhaling. Despite this, his eyes were still filled with hatred as he glared in the direction of the imperial city and bellowed indignantly. "Sir, why didn't you kill Feng Xingjian? With your abilities, you'll definitely be able to kill him if you go all out, right? Why did you hold back? Why did you spare his life?" His voice was hoarse and filled with unwillingness, like the howl of a dying beast. Upon hearing Duan Tianhao's words, Haizi frowned and said coldly, "What I do is none of your business." He assessed inwardly. This Feng Xingjian's martial will is so strong that it far surpasses that of his peers at Tier 5 of the divine level. He must have had some fortuitous encounters. Putting aside the fact that ordinary Tier 5 divine level experts are no match for him. Even we might be weaker than him in terms of martial will after experiencing the depletion of 1,000 years of our lifespans. Thinking of this, Haizi's gaze became even gloomier. Unless a few of us join forces or use the powers of Tier 6 of the divine level, even the 6 of us probably won't be able to kill this lad one-on-one. This continent actually gave birth to such a person, this prowess. He already has 30% of the prince's disposition. Just as Haizi was halfway through his thoughts, his body suddenly paused, and he leaped out from the shadows. He casually tossed Duan Tianhao onto the ground and looked at the surroundings with a grim gaze. The plains let out sizzling sounds under the gentle breeze, and the moonlight's illumination added a hint of coldness to the space before them. Amidst Duan Tianhao's agonizing cries, Haizi said in a deep voice, "Feng Xingjian, I've already given you the plains. Are you still going to pursue me relentlessly? Do you really think that I'm afraid of you?" As Haizi said this, Feng Xingjian's figure slowly appeared 10 meters before the two of them. His back was facing Haizi, and his eyes were looking toward the bright moon in the sky. It was as if he did not care about Haizi at all. Feng Xingjian said indifferently, "Leave Duan Tianhao behind and destroy this clone of yours, and I won't pursue this matter any further." Hearing Feng Xingjian's words, Haizi laughed out loud. His gaze toward Feng Xingjian was filled with condescension and contempt. It was as if he was looking at the ignorance of a native from the depths of the mountains. "Feng Xingjian, you've won this round." But the next round, just as Haizi was halfway through his sentence, his figure suddenly dissipated. Several tens of shadow blades had already slashed at Duan Tianhao's body. Puff sounds rang out incessantly, and Duan Tianhao was instantly dismembered, turning into a pool of flesh and blood. Up until the moment he died, his eyes were still filled with disbelief and indignation. It was as if he did not believe that he would die here. Haizi had unleashed the last of his clone's powers to kill Duan Tianhao in order to prevent Duan Tianhao from divulging his secrets. Although they had set up restrictions in Duan Tianhao's brain, it was still the safest to kill him. However, when the black aura dissipated and Haizi left completely, Duan Tianhao's corpse also disappeared. It was as if everything that had happened was just an illusion. Duan Tianhao was the only one who knew that this was not an illusion. It was because he was still lying on the grass, covered in blood. He watched as Fang Xingjian walked toward him like a demon. Duan Tianhao's death earlier was merely a result of Fang Xingjian's illusory arts. Since Haizi wanted to kill Duan Tianhao to silence him, Fang Xingjian naturally wanted to protect Duan Tianhao's life as well. He wanted to obtain information about the Quanji 7 people from Duan Tianhao's mouth, such as their objective, their strength, and their condition. Looking at Fang Xingjian's cold gaze, a hint of savageness appeared on Duan Tianhao's face. Suddenly, his entire body trembled, and waves of martial will seethed and collided to and fro in his body. His entire body started to shatter. He wanted to activate his martial will to self-destruct and end his own life, unwilling to land in Fang Xingjian's hands. What a fiery temper! With a single thought from Fang Xingjian, streams of black sword marks encompassed Duan Tianhao's body in layers. His body, which had been trembling incessantly and was on the verge of exploding, gradually stabilized. Duan Tianhao glared at Fang Xingjian and said in a bitter voice, "You can forget about getting any information from me. It's not up to you." At the next moment, Duan Tianhao was completely engulfed by the sword marks and disappeared in a void space. In the plains' imperial capital, the entire Steel Lion Kingdom was in a state of chaos. All sorts of maids, guards, and warriors from the plains were running around like headless flies. They had no idea what had happened at all. In the depths of the palace, Prince Suoxian was accompanying the new Azure Heaven King. He raised his head and looked at the battlefield in the sky earlier, his eyes filled with worry. He had been subdued by Fang Xingjian previously and had been sent to the plains to take charge. However, not long after he arrived at the plains, he had encountered Duan Tianhao and Haizi. After being easily subdued by Haizi, he had stayed in the palace. Chapter 982. Right now, the person standing behind Prince Wuxian was the Azure Heaven Monarch whom Duan Tianhao had chosen. He was known as the new ruler of the Steel Lion Kingdom and was also the puppet that Duan Tianhao and the others planned on using to control the plains. The Heaven Sky Monarch was dressed in white muslin, and her entire body looked exquisite, curvaceous in all the right places. Impressively, she was a rare prairie beauty. She was the #1 beauty in the plains, the deceased Heavenly Lion King's aunt. She was known as the Pearl of the Plains, the plains had been in a weakened state. With Fang Xingjian ruling over the southern region and the Heavenly Lion King's death, many aristocrats in the plains wanted to marry to Fang Xingjian to form a marriage alliance. On one hand, Diyu-er's beauty was renowned far and wide, and she was known as the #1 beauty in the plains. They hoped that after she married Fang Xingjian, they would be able to strengthen their relationship, allowing the plains to gain benefits from Fang Xingjian. On the other hand, Diyu-er was the Heavenly Lion King's aunt. Although she was only in her 20s, she had outstanding talent and possessed the strength of a demigod during the world's metamorphosis. With the Heavenly Lion King's death, she inherited the political legacy of the Heavenly Lion King's faction. The other great aristocrats naturally hoped to marry her far away so that they could split the Heavenly Lion King's wealth and authority. For this, the plains had even sent diplomatic envoys to pay a visit to the empire for the sake of the marriage alliance between the two countries. However, Duan Tianhao and Haizi's arrival changed everything. They used violence to suppress all opposition and appointed Diyu-er as the Azure Heaven Monarch, taking charge of the various tribes in the plains in name. Diyu-er had wheat-colored skin, and her thighs appeared slender and strong due to prolonged training. Hidden under her white veil dress, she appeared to be filled with faint allure. However, right now, her amber eyes were staring at the slowly shrinking gaps in the sky. Her pretty face was filled with nervousness and uneasiness. "Prince Wuxian, who's fighting?" Prince Wuxian looked at the sky and said slowly, this sword intent. It seems that Fang Xingjian has arrived. Huh. Hearing that Fang Xingjian had arrived, a hint of astonishment flashed onto Yu Er's face. She felt extremely complicated emotions toward this sword overlord who had killed the heavenly Lion King, brought chaos to the plains, and whom she was supposed to marry. Have they left? Who won? Prince Zhuoxian's marshal will carefully probed into the sky, searching for the remnant wills of this great battle. Hearing Yu Er's question, Prince Zhuoxian frowned and said, "There doesn't seem to be a clear winner." Lord Heizi displayed a martial art of light and darkness transformation, while Fang Xingjian used a sword technique that had never been seen before. The two of them exchanged blows, and it seemed like they were evenly matched. Prince Zhuoxian's mind slowly replayed the scenes that he had sensed through his martial will earlier. Based on the various clues, he tried to deduce the possibilities of the battle. However, Prince Zhuoxian's realm was far too far away from the two of them. Regardless of whether it was Blackie or Fang Xingjian, any of the details in their moves, physical changes that seemed extremely simple to them, particle collisions or changes in waves, could only be analyzed by Prince Zhuoxian after a long time. It was as if he was asking junior high school students to do scientific research. Later on, Lord Heizi seems to have extracted the lifespans of a large number of guards in the palace and performed the longevity Knight Emperor Fist. Prince Zhuoxian recalled the information that Heizi had transmitted through his martial will. He then said slowly, "This move is really ferocious and unrivaled. To think that it can extract lifespans and turn them into power." Then Fang Xingjian also responded with a sword attack. Prince Zhuoxian put out his right hand, as if wanting to touch the sword mark that was slowly dissipating in the air. Amazing. With this sword attack from Fang Xingjian, the entire space above the imperial capital seems to have been turned upside down. Even the most basic structure seems to have been disrupted. However, Lord Heizi's punch is even more ferocious. Not only does this attack contain the mysteriousness and brutality of the Dark Knight, but it also contains an obscure power of lifespans. Even space-time is no longer able to fend off this power. Prince Zhuoxian's eyes seem to be able to penetrate through layers of void space and see the torn land below the imperial capital. Even the world has been torn apart by their attacks. However, it seems that Lord Heizi still has the upper hand. The power in his punch is completely condensed, not leaving any remnants behind. However, Fang Xingjian's sword attack is scattered and chaotic, unable to merge into one. He looked at the myriad of sword marks that were slowly dissipating and judged. After that, Fang Xingjian should have retreated while Lord Heizi gave chase. Hearing Prince Zhuoxian's judgment, a hint of joy and hope flashed onto Yu Er's face. She said, "Lord Heizi has won against Fang Xingjian?" Prince Zhuoxian shook his head and said, "He can only be considered to have the upper hand, right? The two of them should have only sent out a clone to test the waters. It's not the time for the final victor to be decided yet." Hearing Prince Zhuoxian's judgment, a hint of disappointment flashed onto Yu Er's face. "Is that so? However," she immediately asked, "then according to Uncle's judgment, which of the two of them has a higher cultivation?" Prince Zhuoxian stroked his beard and said with some uncertainty, "Although both of us are at Tier 5 of the divine level, to be honest, they're both experts who are extremely close to Tier 6 of the divine level. Both of their cultivations are far above His Majesty, the Heavenly Lion King back then. I'm also a far cry from the two of them. Therefore, even I can't say for sure which one of their cultivations is higher. However, from this battle, although there's a difference between the two of them, there isn't much of a difference. With Lord Heizi taking care of us, our Steel Lion Kingdom shouldn't have to bow down to our enemies." Hearing Prince Zhuoxian's words, Yu slowly let out a breath and said, "That's good, that's good." However, at the next moment, under their astonished gazes, a stream of black sword marks appeared before them like spatial cracks. Duan Tianhao was tossed out with a bang like a dead pig, lying down before them. Fang Xingjian also walked out slowly from void space, throwing his gaze toward Prince Zhuoxian. An extreme sense of danger and soaring, killing aura gushed out. Prince Wuxian's countenance changed drastically, and his martial will surged out. It was not to resist, but to shout out information. "Wait a minute, sir. I was also forced." Bang. Bang, 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 bang. Fang Xingjian flicked his finger lightly, and streams of sword light cut across the night sky like meteors. They contained extremely sharp auras, tearing through the atmosphere, crossing space, and shooting out with a power that could split mountains and seas, as well as overturn the world. In that instant, Diyu only felt as if there were a myriad of light streams flashing past before her eyes. As the sword light pierced through Prince Wuxian's body, a series of explosive sounds rang out from his body. At the next moment, this Tier 5 divine-level expert's conjured physique collapsed and died. Seeing that the strongest expert in the plains, the Tier 5 divine-level expert Prince Wuxian, was killed by a single flick from Fang Xingjian's finger, Diyu revealed an astonished expression. This was especially when Fang Xingjian did not listen to Prince Wuxian's explanation at all and killed him with a single move, displaying an overwhelming ferocity. Fang Xingjian threw an indifferent glance toward Diyu and said, "Azure Heaven King?" Diyu nodded nervously. Fang Xingjian said softly, "I'll be by your side from now on. You'll do whatever I tell you to do. Don't play any tricks with me. There's a limit to my patience right now." Fang Xingjian's delicate voice was like the sound of the wind ringing out slowly next to her ears. Diyu felt as if her chest had been pierced by a sharp sword. A hint of fear and nervousness appeared on Diyu's face. Before Fang Xingjian, even though she was a genius from the plains, a beauty who had inherited countless political legacies from the Heavenly Lion King, had great means, and had outstanding leadership abilities, she was still unable to suppress the fear in her heart. Chapter 983. Over the next few days, under the suppression of Fang Xingjian's martial prowess, he once again gained control over the entire imperial capital with a thunderous momentum. However, Fang Xingjian did not cripple the Yuer. Instead, he used the number one beauty in the plains as a puppet to control all the tribes in the plains. Right now, in the palace, Diyu was reporting the current situation in the imperial capital to Fang Xingjian. The city walls and streets are still being repaired, but the people in the various districts have settled down. However, Diyu raised her head carefully and looked at this man who was the most authoritative and possibly the strongest in the southern part of the continent. She said slowly, "Recently, some news has started to spread in the plains." "Speak," Fang Xingjian said coldly. "They say that Imperial Preceptor has taken over the imperial capital once again in order to monopolize the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures. They say that you've already received news of the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures." Oh, hearing Diyu's words, the corners of Fang Xingjian's lips curled up into a cold smile as he thought, "Is this news spread by the Quanji 7 people? It seems like their goal is to lure people to the plains, after all. Why are they doing this?" Fang Xingjian shook his head. "I still know too little. I don't know their goal or their strength at all. Moreover, their main forces are hiding in a small world, and I can't use my sudden inspiration to find them. I still need to get more information about them." At the thought of this, Duan Tianhao's figure appeared in Fang Xingjian's mind. He threw a glance at Diyu and said, "I got it. You've done well. You could take your leave first." Diyu lowered her head and retreated step by step with an extremely respectful expression. When she walked, she even seemed to intentionally reveal her long and beautiful legs under her dress, as if she wanted to use her body to tempt Fang Xingjian. However, after Fang Xingjian saw that she had left, he arrived in a courtyard in the palace with a flash. According to the information provided by Diyu and the information from the East military execution orders, Duan Tianhao's only relative is his younger sister, Duan Zian. Although she's his younger sister in name, she's his father's adopted daughter. The two of them have been childhood sweethearts and are practically engaged to each other. After he came to the plains, he also protected Duan Zian in the palace. Fang Xingjian's marshal will scan the room before him, and he saw a purple-haired young lady sitting on the bed, looking like she was about to cry. She was wearing black training clothes that wrapped tightly around her body, outlining her curvaceous figure. His slender and long legs were wrapped in a layer of delicate purple pantyhose, which was used to assist in leg movements during training. Looking at this beautiful young lady, Fang Xingjian stroked his chin. She should be the greatest weakness and flaw in Duan Tianhao's heart. If I can invade Duan Tianhao's heart with a sword seed through her, I'll be able to break open his heart and bypass the layer of power that is protecting Duan Tianhao. As he spoke, Fang Xingjian had already taken a step into the room. Looking at Duan Zian, who was startled and had assumed a battle stance like a kitten, Fang Xingjian smiled. It was as if the entire room had lit up. Seeing Fang Xingjian smile, Duan Zian's face, which was originally filled with hatred, anxiety, and fear, immediately paused and slowly turned into hesitation. "You." Fang Xingjian walked up to Duan Zian. With each step he took, the expression on his face seemed to become gentler. He seemed to be exuding an unrivaled allure, causing Duan Zian's heartbeat to accelerate. Her face flushed red, and she started to pant incessantly. With Fang Xingjian's current cultivation, performing the heart sword path to invade the heart of an existence like Duan Zian, who was not even at the divine level, was a piece of cake for him. "You, don't come over." Her righteous refusal had only just left her mouth when it turned into intermittent panting. Duan Zian even fell weakly onto the bed with a thud, and she started to twist her legs uneasily. Fang Xingjian walked up to her slowly and put out his hand to stroke the top of her head. Duan Zian only felt a shiver run through her entire body, as if there were waves of warmth seething in her heart. Fang Xingjian's voice was like a devil's allure, ringing out next to her ears slowly. "Tell me, who's helping your elder brother?" Over 10 minutes later, Duan Zian was lying limply on the bed. Her clothes seemed to be a little disheveled, and there was an enchanting flush on her face. Her eyes were glazed over, and her body would occasionally twitch. Fang Xingjian stroked his chin and thought. As expected, he didn't even use a hint of his powers to protect her. It's because this woman doesn't seem to know anything. She only knows that there are two people. One is that Fatso has taken Duan Tianhao in as his disciple, and the other is helping him rule over the plains. I'll still have to settle this with Duan Tianhao. Simultaneously, in the sword realm, the sky was filled with stacking layers of sword-shaped phantom images. They moved about, stacking together and forming floating clouds. The ground beneath their feet was filled with densely packed swords. There was almost no space between the tips of the swords. They formed the ground here. If an ordinary person were to take a step on it, they would probably pierce through flesh and blood. In the distance, many huge swords that were several hundred or even several thousand meters in length were stacked together, forming this world's sword mountain. In the entire sword realm, it was as if everything was formed from swords, and it contained the sword intent that Fang Xingjian had cultivated throughout his entire life. Right now, Duan Tianhao's body was encompassed by black sword marks. Only his head was exposed as he floated in midair. His countenance was pale, and his eyes were bloodshot. Looking at the vast land before him, he laughed out loud and said, "Be ***, come on, show me whatever means you have. Don't even think about getting any information from me. If I die, I'll wait for you down there. Master and the others will avenge me. Your entire clan and everyone related to you will die because of you. They'll kill all the men in your clan and rape all the women in your clan. They'll sell them to the dirtiest brothel and let the most ignorant and boorish barbarians enjoy them." Faced with the sword realm before him, Duan Tianhao seemed to have thrown caution to the wind. He had completely given up on living on and let out a series of vicious curses. "Ha ha ha ha. Do you think that you'll win? What you've seen isn't even 1% of our powers. Once we really launch our attack, even the holy sea of truth won't be able to stop us, let alone you. Your clan will be trampled into the mud, and all your women will be sold like sows. All your subordinates will suffer the most brutal torture and revenge At the next moment, Duan Tianhao felt a pain in his mouth. His entire mouth had been stirred up into a mess, and he let out muffled sounds. However, he was unable to say a single word. Chapter 984. Just as he started to struggle, wanting to use his Tier 1 divine level cultivation to regenerate his flesh and blood, there was a series of light and shadow changes before his eyes. He was sent out of the Sword Realm and arrived before a small courtyard in the palace. Fang Xingjian's figure rang out in his mind. "Your words have reminded me of something. Then I'll invite you over to watch a good show." A hint of disapproval flashed in Duan Tianhao's eyes, as if he was not afraid that Fang Xingjian would do anything. However, the next moment, he heard a soft gasp coming from the room, and his eyes opened wide. He stared in the direction of the room, and his mouth, which had been regenerated at some point in time, was already gritting hard. He said each word clearly, "Fang Xingjian." His body floated up slowly and arrived before the room's window. The scene he saw next caused his eyes to be on the verge of exploding. It was as if blood was dripping out from his eyes. Duan Zian was carried in Fang Xingjian's arms, and her clothes were taken off piece by piece. Duan Zian's face was flushed red, and she stuck out her tongue as she hugged Fang Xingjian, kissing and touching him. It was as if she was admiring the most beautiful treasure. The subsequent scenes caused Duan Tianhao to almost grind his teeth into pieces. He wanted to struggle and stop everything, but he realized that he could not move his body at all. He opened his mouth, wanting to bellow loudly, but he realized that he could not say a single word. He struggled for a very long time, wanting to turn his head away. However, he could only watch everything as the infuriated voices kept ringing out in his ears. Fang Xingjian stood behind Duan Tianhao, watching as the latter's face turned from red to purple, then from purple to green, and in the end, it turned completely pale. Duan Tianhao's emotions were in an extremely chaotic state. He then threw a glance at the bed in the room. There was nothing on it. There was no sign of Duan Zian or Fang Xingjian. Even the entire room, the palace, and the world were still within his sword realm. How could he possibly let Duan Tianhao out and return to Miracle World? Wouldn't it be very easy for the Quanji 7 people to discover him? Although the power of the Quanji 7 people protected my sea of consciousness, it's still not enough. However, Duan Tianhao's own strength is too weak, and he's unable to fully unleash this power. As long as a flaw appears in his heart, his entire sea of consciousness will shake violently. At that moment, Duan Tianhao's sea of wisdom had seemingly transformed into a raging storm. However, the power within his mind, which was used to protect his sea of wisdom, especially his memories, did not activate. It simply watched quietly as everything unfolded before it. Clearly, it would not attack Duan Tianhao's sea of wisdom. At the same time, as Duan Tianhao's body was being moved to and fro by countless spaces, Fang Xingjian's voice rang out in his mind. "I've long since reached Tier 6 of the divine level. Even the Quanji 7 people won't be able to help you take revenge." This voice was like the last straw that broke the camel's back. Duan Tianhao's sea of consciousness seemed to let out a loud rumble, and his entire mind was in chaos. Just then, Fang Xingjian tapped out with a finger, and a stream of dark sword light cut across void space. Wherever it passed by, there seemed to be countless mysterious existences whispering to each other, displaying an unrivaled magical power. Just as Duan Tianhao's mind was in a raging storm, revealing countless flaws, the sword seed formed from the heart sword path had already invaded his mind silently. In the blink of an eye, it went through several tens of changes, seeming to have become a part of the power in Duan Tianhao's sea of consciousness. Then it headed toward the depths of his memories. Fang Xingjian's gaze lit up. It's done. At the next moment, countless memories recorded in Duan Tianhao's mind immediately appeared. They were all the memories and information from when he was young, from the time he could remember things. Fang Xingjian read through them patiently, continuing to search for information regarding the Quanji 7 people. Elsewhere, in the Holy See of Truth's Institute of Sacred Texts. In the secret room, Erbian, the immortal child, and Feng Xingjian were seated on the ground. The immortal child said, "Combining the strong points of our three sects, we'll create an extremely powerful virtual image that no one has ever done before or since." Erbian said calmly, "In the end, the virtual image is just a form of utilization of power. It's just that each Tier 6 divine level expert has their strong points, and everyone's virtual image is different. However, we can exchange all of our martial arts and knowledge to build the most powerful virtual image martial technique." Feng Xingjian said, "I can contribute all of my sword arts." As he spoke, he opened his mouth and spewed out streams of sword intents. They floated in midair and turned into many large bright words that appeared. At the sight of this scene, the immortal child also revealed a heroic expression. Good. Haha, since that's the case, I won't keep anything to myself." As he spoke, his robe lit up, and countless characters condensed to form a pure light core that floated out slowly. "These are all of the martial arts I know of in the Holy See of Truth, as well as my three great divine arts. It's just that I only know how to use the divine arts and don't know their principles. However, the Church still has many martial arts treasuries. I'll bring them over later." Erbian nodded. The White Emperor's zenith sword moved slightly, and there seemed to be 7 light spots flashing past in void space. The white light spots were like densely packed tadpoles, covering the entire walls of the secret room. "These are all the truths I know about the world, as well as my comprehension of the world from the previous world." Looking at the trio's contributions, the immortal child revealed a hint of agitation. First of all, how rich was the martial arts that the Church had accumulated over 10,000 years? This could be said to be a terrifying accumulation. Feng Xingjian himself was a rare talent that was hard to come by even in 1,000 years. His martial arts had also integrated the essence of Earth's magic prince, the Empire's martial arts, the Underworld sect, the Myriad Star Mountain, and many other major factions. He had also obtained the scientific knowledge of several worlds, and his accumulation could be said to be extremely rich. Just him alone was comparable to a country. Erbian was even more amazing. He had the comprehension of the powers of the 13 demonic gods from the previous world, and he had even used modern scientific methods and ancient subjective experiences to complement each other's experiences. Just the thought of combining the cultivation experiences of these 3 people to create a world-shaking virtual image martial art made the immortal child extremely excited. Feng Xingjian, who was discussing the virtual image with Erbian and the immortal child, paused for a moment and suddenly said, "There's information. I've read the memories of the Quanji 7 people from Duan Tianhao's mind." "Oh." The immortal child's eyes lit up, and he immediately asked, "How is it? Where are they hiding? What's their objective? How much power do they have left?" Given Duan Tianhao's realm, he's unable to tell how much battle prowess they have left. However, their objective right now is to release the leader of the Quanji 7 people, a person called Prince. Feng Xingjian said slowly, "So only 6 of them have been released. That prince, who is the most powerful among them, is still sealed up." The immortal child was stunned for a moment. "But didn't you check out the 7 seals, and all of them have been unlocked?" "They have indeed been unlocked. However, there should still be some circumstances that we don't understand." Feng Xingjian shook his head. "They're still hiding in some small divine country that they've opened up. It's too difficult to find them. However, now that we know their objective, we'll be able to target them." Feng Xingjian raised his head and said slowly, "I've decided to announce a piece of news to the entire world. 3 months later, the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures will be announced in the imperial capital." The immortal child was stunned for a moment, but he then reacted. "They want 1 month, but you said it is 3 months. They want to meet in the plains, so you'll meet in the imperial capital. Although I don't know how they want to rescue the prince, doing the opposite to them will definitely interfere. Moreover, this time around, they've released news that I've obtained news of the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures. I can make use of this." Fang Xinjiang nodded and said, "Moreover, 3 months' time is enough for the three of us to join forces and push out the embryonic form of the virtual image. Won't the time be a little tight? It's enough. This time around, I defeated one of the Quanji's 7 people with my Tier 5 Divine level powers, although the other party only used his Tier 5 Divine level realm. This also shows that they've lost too much power during the 1,000 years of depletion. 3 months later, with our improvements, it'll be enough for the three of us to join forces and kill them." A faint gleam flashed in Fang Xinjiang's eyes as he thought, 3 months later, according to the deal, I'll only be left with 1 year of lifespan. Chapter 985. Therefore, in the time that followed, most of Fang Xinjiang's powers were used to derive the virtual image together with Erbian and the immortal child. They first learned from each other's martial arts and knowledge, linking up the strong points of the 3 factions. Then they created a set of virtual image martial arts that gathered so many legacies. Of course, Fang Xinjiang also created 2 clones, one to keep watch over the imperial capital and the other to keep watch over the plains. They were used to handle various matters. The clones of divine-level experts were merely different parts of their bodies. It meant that while Fang Xinjiang was deriving the virtual image, he was also taking care of some matters in the outside world. Not long after, just as the news of Fang Xinjiang obtaining the divine Sun Emperor's treasures became increasingly unbelievable, and with the Quanji 7 people adding fuel to the fire, the Empire released the news that Fang Xinjiang would be announcing the details of the divine Sun Emperor's treasures in the imperial capital 3 months later. All of a sudden, a great commotion broke out. If it could be said that the Plains to Yu's announcement of this matter, even if it was an invitation to the various major influences, everyone would still be skeptical. However, as the top expert in the south, the Empire's imperial preceptor, and an existence known as the Sword Overlord, Fang Xinjiang's announcement would naturally cause everyone to believe it without a doubt. All of a sudden, the entire land seemed to be in an uproar. Countless influences, organizations, and experts from the countries made preparations to head to the imperial capital 3 months later. Many experts even headed for the imperial capital not long after hearing the news. Almost everyone wanted to try their luck, hoping that they would be able to obtain the divine Sun Emperor's legacies at the next moment. In the imperial capital's palace, the 4th prince sighed and said, "Xinjiang, isn't this too ostentatious? By then, over half of the divine-level experts in the entire land will probably come to the imperial capital. With so many experts gathered in one city, there will be all sorts of vendettas, grudges, conflicts, as well as thoughts about the divine Sun Emperor's treasures. God knows how much trouble there will be." Hearing that, Fang Xinjiang waved his hand and said, "It's fine. This time around, the reason why I've taken the initiative to take on this matter and let all the experts in the world enter the imperial capital is to let them know that no one can overturn the situation here." He looked at the 4th prince and continued, "Get Tyrant and the others to come back. For the next 3 months, focus on cultivating and attaining breakthroughs. Strive to reach Tier 5 of the divine level before the meet starts." Just as Fang Xinjiang said this, he suddenly raised his eyebrows. "Oh, there really are people who aren't afraid of death." Right now, in the sky above the imperial capital, the purple mage King Claudia stood in void space. Her eyes swept across the city under her feet, and a hint of interest flashed in them. The divine Sun Emperor's treasures? Interesting, but who would wait for you for 3 months? A layer of blurry purple sand encompassed her body, as if hiding this purple mage king behind a layer of spatial barrier. Ordinary vision and hearing would not be able to sense her existence at all. The purple mage king had clearly been attracted over by the news that Fang Xinjiang had released. To an expert like her, there was no reason for her to abide by the agreement of 3 months. She would come as she pleased and take whatever she wanted. This was her normal attitude. She flew one round in the sky above the imperial capital and eventually stood above the palace. This imperial capital is built pretty well, but its foundation is too weak and there are no defenses. Let me see where Fangxingjian is. During the period of time she had left the land, she had relied on the army of insects to conquer several worlds in one go. With the help of countless resources, she had raised her strength to the limits below Tier 6 of the divine level. Right now, Claudia felt that she was merely a step away from Tier 6 of the divine level. The appearance of the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures immediately attracted her attention. If she could get her hands on the Divine Sun Emperor's legacy, she would have a 100% chance of attaining Tier 6 of the divine level. However, just as she was observing the palace and searching for traces of Fangxingjian, a sword mark suddenly appeared on her chest. She let out a stifled snort and retreated at rapid speed. Her chest had been slashed open and was currently in the midst of healing up. The purple mage king Claudia frowned and said in surprise and doubt, "Fangxingjian, how did you discover me?" Fangxingjian slowly walked out from void space, looked at the purple mage king, and said, "You've been looking at me from above for so long. If I still can't discover you, then all my years of cultivation would have been for naught." Claudia let out a cold snort, looked at Fangxingjian, and said, "Fangxingjian, it's impossible for you to monopolize the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures by yourself. Count me in. If we join forces, there'll still be a possibility of unlocking the treasures." Hearing Claudia's probing words, Fangxingjian did not reply. Instead, he lifted his hand and tapped out with a finger. Black Lotus, myriad swords. Immediately, streams of black sword marks appeared in void space as if they had always been there. By the time Claudia reacted, a black lotus formed from black sword marks had already bloomed on her chest. This was a sword move that Fangxingjian had come up with while deriving martial arts with Urbian and the Immortal Child over the past few days. The black lotus formed from the sword marks took root in every corner of Claudia's body. They seemed to be able to instantly engulf all vitality and will. As a soft rumble rang out, the surrounding space seemed to fluctuate a little. Claudia's clone instantly turned into a pile of powder and dissipated in the air, leaving behind only her final sentence. What sword move is this? However, Fangxingjian disappeared without a trace with a flash. Several thousand li's away, in a cave several hundred kilometers underground, a black spot swelled up abruptly. It was Claudia's divine country. The entire divine country was filled with densely packed swarms of bugs, twisting about and letting out roars. It was just like the hell in the legends. In the center of the swarm of bugs, Claudia opened her eyes abruptly as she sat on a throne that was formed from countless huge bugs. To think that he managed to destroy my clone with a single move. This Fangxingjian's cultivation has really improved by leaps and bounds. Next to her, Chaos Witch Lamia smiled and said, "How is it? Is Fangxingjian willing to work together with you? This person's cultivation has become even more exquisite." Claudia shook her head, and this time around, his boldness seems to be even stronger. This time around, he invited all the heroes in the world to join him. Beside her, the Chaos Witch laughed coldly and said, "If he really manages to turn it into some divine treasures meeting, it'll mean that all the experts in the world will be under his control once they arrive in the imperial capital. Even if he's a dragon, he'll have to coil up, and even if he's a tiger, he'll have to lie low. However, he's really dreaming if he wants to suppress the four extremes single-handedly." The Chaos Witch looked at Claudia and said, "How about it? This person is arrogant and unruly. He's not a suitable opponent to work together with. If you're willing, we can advance and retreat together." Claudia took a long look at the Chaos Witch. She knew that this which had been operating within the boundaries of the Holy Sea of Truth for the past few years. She also had an inexplicable relationship with the three saints. However, Claudia relied on her purple faction black magic to have the ability to head to other worlds. Her bug nest base was even in other worlds. With this route of retreat, she did not mind lying in the muddy waters. Chapter 986. As Fangxingjian released the news, the various influences in the world also took action. Other than Claudia, only other divine-level experts snuck into the palace at night, hoping to obtain the secret of the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures. However, even though Claudia's clone was killed by Feng Xingjian, she managed to avoid the sudden inspiration senses by relying on the divine country's small world. The other divine-level experts had yet to reach Tier 5 of the realm. Before Feng Xingjian, not only would their clones die, but their actual bodies would also not be able to escape. However, there were still people who tried to sneak into the palace by relying on their secret arts to conceal their figures and auras. Therefore, within a short 10 days, a total of 3 divine-level experts were either captured or killed. One of them transformed into a myriad of clones, merging into the consciousness of ordinary people, and was then picked up and crushed by Feng Xingjian with a single sword attack. Another person hid his cultivation, turned into a bird, and settled down in the palace. He was caught by Feng Xingjian and slashed into a mist of blood. The last person even turned into a plant, growing from the ground bit by bit. However, he was also uprooted by Feng Xingjian, crippled of his cultivation, and sent to teach in the Royal Academy. After capturing and killing 3 divine-level experts in a row, Feng Xingjian once again displayed his dominating abilities. The other divine-level experts no longer dared to target the Imperial Capital's palace, and the Sword Overlord's name once again shook the world. Therefore, in the days that followed, Feng Xingjian worked on his martial arts with Erbian and the Immortal Child. At the same time, he also helped the divine-level experts under him cultivate in the palace. He also cleaned up the Imperial Court, especially the East Military Execution Order, which was under Tyrant. In the blink of an eye, almost 3 months had passed. It was the day that Feng Xingjian had agreed to hold the Divine Treasures meeting. Right now, the Imperial capital was filled with people. Countless experts from all over the world had gathered here. There were conferred knights and guards from the East Military Execution Order at the various city gates. There was also a long queue outside the city gates. Maria was also standing in the queue, looking at the Imperial capital's city walls with a hint of yearning on her face. At this moment, there was a hubbub of voices in the group. Everyone was discussing the Divine Treasures meeting. This time around, most of the deity-level experts in the continent have probably come. Look, it was the Northern True will sex old man compliance. It was said that he had attained a breakthrough to Tier 3 of the Divine Level 2 months ago. He actually came to participate in the Divine Treasures meeting this time. There's also that person. He's the Dragon King Sex cult master, the world-reverenced Dragon King. He was a divine-level expert from the Northern Barbarians to begin with. I wonder how strong he is now. Maria looked at the various experts in the crowd with a solemn look in her eyes. 3 months ago, she had met Feng Xingjian in the Eastern Sand region's Forbidden Grounds. After being saved by him, Feng Xingjian imparted her the prodigious demolition sword physique and told her to look for him in the Imperial capital if she were to reach the maximum level of it within 3 months. She had thought that with her aptitude, it would be impossible for her to reach the maximum level of the prodigious demolition sword physique within 3 months. However, her understanding and aptitude toward martial arts seemed to have improved by leaps and bounds over the past 3 months. She had even stepped into the second transition a month ago. Her understanding of the prodigious demolition sword physique also improved by leaps and bounds, and she really managed to reach the maximum level of it within 3 months. She had come to the Imperial capital in search of Feng Xingjian, but she just so happened to run into the Divine Treasures meeting, which was a rare occurrence in 100 years. As they queued up to enter the city, it was also the first time that Maria had seen so many experts. She had never realized that there were so many second transition knights and divine-level experts in this world. It's because of the world's metamorphosis that the number of experts has been increasing. Even the divine-level experts, who were hard to come by, have become much more numerous than before. Looking at the scene before her, Maria exclaimed, "Right now, even conferred knights are probably existences that are like ants in the Imperial capital. Even divine-level experts only have the ability to protect themselves. Only those Tier 4 or even 5 divine-level experts can truly carry out their will." Just then, An overwhelming power descended from the sky, and a martial will that was like a volcanic eruption crossed the sky. It was about to leap over the city walls and land into the city. Countless people gasped. It's a divine-level expert. Maria thought, is he thinking of not having to queue up and entering the city directly? Just as this gush of power was about to leap over the city walls and dash into the city, a cold snort rang out, and a blue moon slowly rose up from the ground, exuding waves of coldness. Wherever it passed by, it was as if even the air was going to be frozen, forcefully blocking that divine-level expert from entering. An explosive rumble rang out, and the winds and clouds seethed in the sky. The powers of the two divine-level experts collided. That expert whose martial will was like a volcano was forced out, revealing the appearance of an old man with crimson hair and brows. It's Old Man Earth Fire. That's the #1 expert from a small overseas country, the Earthfire country. A small overseas country doesn't know their manners. Do they think that they can act like they do in other places after coming to the imperial capital? Old Man Earthfire's eyes narrowed, and a hint of cold gleam flashed in them as he said coldly, "Who wants to stop me?" With a flash, Lan Yu appeared before Old Man Earthfire. Her fair face appeared even more elegant and beautiful. After the past 3 months of cultivation, her martial will exuded an unfathomable disposition. It's the Blue Moon Fairy. The fairy has become even more beautiful. If I can speak to the Blue Moon Fairy, I'm willing even if my lifespan is shortened by 10 years. Looking at Lan Yu, who was dressed in blue robes and stood in midair like a fairy, Maria's eyes lit up. It's one of the 5 experts under the Lord. Over the past 3 months, the 4th Prince, Lan Yu, the Astral Ancestor, the Blue Sacred Moonlight, Tyrant, and Prince Philip had all improved by leaps and bounds by relying on the 9 levels of the Mystical Prince, forming a team of 2 to clear the trial. They had also made use of the Church's method of choosing worlds and extending the time. However, the 4th Prince had not made much of a move. The other 5 had helped to suppress the various factions and even swept through the plains, building up a great reputation. A series of gasps rang out on the ground. In the sky, after hearing Old Man Earthfire's question, Lan Yu said calmly, "In the imperial capital, unless it's an expert at Tier 5 of the divine level or above, no one is allowed to fly freely." After saying this, a blue moon slowly appeared behind Old Man Earthfire. As this blue moon got increasingly closer to Old Man Earthfire, one could even see that the entire moon seemed to be enlarging rapidly. One could see the many mountain ranges and valleys on it clearly. Old Man Earthfire raised his brows and said extremely solemnly, "Divine country. At Tier 1 of the divine level, one's martial will would be born, and they would be able to make use of the world's powers to interfere with the world. However, at Tier 2 of the divine level, one would be able to move at light speed, completely suppressing those at Tier 1 of the divine level. However, at Tier 3 of the divine level, one would be able to form clones and have a stronger survivability than moving at light speed. At Tier 4 of the divine level, one would be able to stand on their own and be hard to kill after obtaining sudden inspiration. They could even rely on sudden inspiration to find their opponent's clones and chase after them. At Tier 5 of the divine level, one would only be able to create a divine country with an increase in their battle prowess. As long as it was a divine country that had broken away from the world's timeline, they would be able to break away from sudden inspiration senses. This would allow them to roam freely in the world and preserve their lives forever. Although Old Man Earthfire did not believe that Lan Yu's divine country could be independent from the timeline, it was still a divine country after all. Right now, Old Man Earthfire was only at Tier 4 of the divine level. Therefore, he obediently descended from the sky and cupped his hands toward Lan Yu. Then with a flash, he darted into the crowd and disappeared. It was as if he felt embarrassed and did not even say a word. Lan Yu nodded, turned, and left. Her cold and aloof appearance caused a series of sighs to ring out again. With Old Man Earthfire admitting defeat, no one present dared to create trouble. Maria followed the crowd into the city and very soon arrived at the place where the divine treasures meeting would be held. It was a huge square. Chapter 987. The entire square was paved with greenish-black stone slabs. Maria exerted a little force on them and discovered that they were extremely tough. They did not budge at all when she stepped on them, and there was even a faint rebounding force. Looking at the strange greenish-black stone slabs under her feet, Maria frowned and thought to herself, "What tough stone slabs." It seems that this square was specially modified to accommodate these experts. She lifted her head and saw that the public square before her was filled with densely packed crowds. Second transition knights, who were usually hard to come by and could dominate a region, kept popping up like chives. Even demigods, who could dominate an area, could be seen everywhere. They were like cabbages that could be found by the roadside. Those who had yet to reach the second transition would not even be able to enter this square, yet they could only stand outside. Maria swept her gaze across and saw that many of the buildings at the borders of the square had been occupied by countless knights. A dense crowd was squeezed on top of them, and all of them were watching the situation in the square. However, despite there being so many experts, no one was causing trouble. These experts gathered in groups. They were usually a group of experts from the same faction in the same region. There were also some experts who had conflicts or grudges against each other, quarreling and cursing each other. However, no one came to a fight. Even the cultivators, who would usually clash with each other or glare at each other, were all well-behaved. They were squeezed into the square like sardines in a can. All of this was because of the reputation of the strongest expert in the south of the world, Sword Overlord Feng Xingjian. Maria could clearly see that there were many small platforms erected in the square. Many men and women dressed in gold-lined, long robes sat on the platforms, occasionally throwing sharp gazes toward the noisiest areas in the square. Wherever their gazes swept past, there would be silence. It could be said to be as quiet as cicadas in winter. As if sensing Maria's curious gaze, a man with platinum-colored hair next to Maria said in a low voice, "Those are the people from the East Military Execution Order. Each of these people is extremely vicious and merciless, and they also have Tyrant and the Sword Overlord backing them up. Ordinary demigods will have to run when they see them, and even divine-level experts will have to show them some respect." Hearing this, Maria jumped in fright. She had not expected this to be the infamous East Military Administration that had wiped out countless factions and clans. She looked at the platinum-haired man beside her and said, "Hello, may I ask who you are?" "I'm Chris from North Bible Hall." The man smiled, revealing a face that could enchant thousands of girls. He looked at Maria and said, "Miss, you look like you have a profound cultivation and are full of spirit. You must be from a great sect, right?" Maria thought for a moment and said, "I'm from the Myriad Star Mountain." "So, you're under the astral ancestor." The Bible Hall's Chris revealed a hint of understanding. He then nodded and left. Maria knew that the Bible Hall was a faction that was under the influence of the Holy See of Truth in the North. Therefore, they were not on good terms with the Empire's factions. She then followed the crowd and headed toward the center of the square. Although most of the experts in the square, including some demigods and divine-level experts, could only stand among the crowd, there was still a circle of stone platforms that were several meters tall, floating in the sky above the center of the square. These several tens of stone platforms floating in the sky were prepared for some major influences. Among the 5 divine-level experts under Feng Xingjian, the Astral Ancestors' Myriad Stars Palace was considered one of them. As a disciple of the Myriad Stars Palace, Maria could also try to go up the platform. As she leaped onto the platform lightly, 2 young men and women immediately came up to her. One of them asked, "Junior Marshal's sister, where on earth have you been during this period of time? Why didn't you contact us?" Maria said a little awkwardly, "I went to explore some relics with someone else, but we ended up getting lost inside. However, we also had a fortuitous encounter." As she said that, she released the power of the ether particles in her body slightly. "Oh, To think that you've already completed the second transition? This is a blessing in disguise for you. However, your father is really worried to death. Just as the few disciples were chattering nonstop, the sky suddenly seemed to darken. Then streams of starlight flashed incessantly in the dark sky. The starry sky could not be seen in the entire miracle world. However, right now, there is someone circulating a mysterious technique, bringing down the night sky and causing the stars to circulate. Fireworks from the universe's primordial world appeared amidst the layers of night sky. Seeing this sudden descent of the starry sky, the myriad stars palace's disciples and the unaffiliated people below the platform all gasped in surprise. The Grand Master has arrived. The myriad stars palace's astral ancestor has arrived. Is this what the starry sky looks like? This is the first time I've seen it. As countless people gasped in surprise, an extremely majestic beam of starlight descended from the sky, smashing onto the platform like a light pillar. A majestic power kept on pressing down, and it was as if the entire sky was pressing down explosively. The tremors caused countless people to almost drop to their knees. As the astral ancestor descended, 3 streams of slightly weaker starlight also descended from behind the light pillar. They were the astral ancestor's 3 disciples, the Lone Star Knight, the Stardust Fairy, and the Star Beast Hunter. The 3 of them had clearly attained a breakthrough to Tier 1 of the divine level. Seeing the astral ancestor's arrival, the myriad stars palace's disciples instantly went up to him, dropped to their knees, and shouted, "Welcome, Grandmaster." The astral ancestor nodded and did not say a word. He sat at the very front of the platform, and his 3 disciples followed closely behind. Maria also stood at the very back, looking at the venue excitedly. The astral ancestor's arrival was like a signal. With his arrival, batches of divine-level experts entered the venue one after another. Even the empty stone platforms that had been left for the various major influences started to have experts appearing in succession. Therefore, the square became increasingly crowded, and more experts appeared on the stone platforms floating in the sky. Those are the people from the Northern Barbarians' fire worship sect. The countries from overseas have also arrived. The Holy Scripture Hall's Hall Master has arrived. They're a faction that was founded several thousand years ago after a pope abdicated. Just then, a series of flashes flashed past, and several tens of black-robed people suddenly appeared on a stone platform in the distance. They were all wrapped up in black long robes, with only the picture of a tulip appearing on their backs. Their appearance seemed to have caused countless people to be astonished. Many elderly people pointed at those black-robed people in disbelief and shouted, "People from the Tulip dynasty? To think that there are still descendants of this dynasty? Even they have been lured out this time around." Hearing this, Maria's heart skipped a beat. The Tulip dynasty was a super dynasty that had almost unified the world 1,000 years ago. They were a mysterious dynasty that had existed in the same era as Saint Adam. To think that they still had descendants? Just as countless people were astonished by the Tulip dynasty's descendants, at the next moment, splashing sounds of water filled up the world. A young man let out a loud shout and pointed toward the sky in the west, saying in disbelief, "The sea, the tsunami is coming." At the end of the western sky, splashing sounds rang out incessantly. Waves that were several hundred meters tall were surging in the sky in defiance of common sense, pressing down toward the imperial capital with an aura that could engulf the world. Chapter 988. Faced with the overwhelming wave that descended from the sky, seeming as if it was going to engulf the entire imperial capital and turn it into a vast ocean, countless knights broke into a commotion and gasped. However, most of the conferred knights, demigods, and divine-level experts did not move at all. It was because they knew that it was not just the southern continent's top expert, Feng Xingjian. With so many experts present, how could they possibly allow the imperial capital to be engulfed by the flood? In the blink of an eye, the seething tsunami got closer, and everyone could even sense water vapor gushing toward them. The entire imperial capital was 100 times wetter than before, and there were even water droplets descending from the sky, as if it was drizzling. Amidst the waves in the sky, everyone could finally see the rows of figures on the waves clearly. There were several tens of men and women who wore dark green armor and had tall and big physiques. They were like small giants. They rode on the tsunamis, and behind them were several 10,000 warriors of various colors. These warriors were all riding on various dragon-shaped and tiger-shaped sea beasts. They wore the same armor and emitted unique waves of ether particles from all over their bodies. This was clearly an army formed from several tens of thousands of second transition knights. The sea beasts they rode on were all ferocious beasts that were at least at the second transition. They could be said to have astonishing battle prowess. However, what caught the attention of the many divine-level experts present were the few leaders at the top. This was especially so for a huge man with a height of 3 meters. The muscles all over his body were as distinct as marble, and his bare upper body exuded astonishing power waves. What was even more amazing was that with each of his movements, the space would distort, and the tsunami in the sky seemed to be swaying along with his figure. He had single-handedly controlled the tsunami, which encompassed a range of 100 leagues to pass through the sky and arrive in the sky above the imperial capital. At the sight of this scene, everyone revealed astonished expressions. Seeing that the tsunami had stopped in the sky above the imperial capital, seeming as if it would come crashing down at any moment, a beauty who wore armor that resembled a bikini and had tanned skin that was like a black pearl let out a delicate laugh and bellowed out with her martial will, "Don't worry. The leader of the overseas countries, the Four Seas Alliance's alliance chief, the Sea Monarch, has arrived. Where is Sword Overlord Fong Xingjian?" Violent Martial will turned into a series of light waves and extended out toward the entire imperial capital. A loud and clear voice rang out in everyone's minds, displaying an extremely arrogant and haughty aura. Maria asked in surprise, "Who is this person? How dare you be so arrogant?" The senior martial brother said softly, "This is probably the #1 expert in the countries across the seas, known as the Four Seas King. It's said that he's also a peak tier 5 divine level character. Rumor has it that he controls the 10 countries in the sea and all the sea trade, as well as the resources in the sea. His words are like an imperial edict on the sea, and the trade between the countless islands around the continent are all under his control. Rumor has it that if the wealth he controls is converted into gold, it can cover the entire imperial capital." He pointed to the high platform where the royal families of the overseas countries were standing. There were already people kneeling on the ground. Hearing that, Maria's mouth opened slightly, and her eyes were filled with astonishment. She looked at the Sea Monarch in the sky and said, "To think that there's such a formidable character overseas." However, hearing that lady's delicate bellow, the countenances of the many divine-level experts present did not look too good. Although many influences were not on good terms with Fong Xingjian, when faced with an influence that did not belong to the continent like the Sea Monarch, they would still subconsciously feel a sense of xenophobia. This made them feel infuriated when they saw the other party's arrogance. The astral ancestor's eyes narrowed as he looked at the sky, as if wanting to make a move. However, at the next moment, he smiled. "It seems that there's no need for me to make a move." Boom! A series of distortions appeared in the sky, and the temperature rose at an unbelievable speed. A tremendous amount of bubbles appeared in the tsunami, as if it had been instantly boiled. "Impudent! How can the imperial capital allow you to bellow as you wish and disrupt the order?" Then, as a soft bellow rang out, the space became extremely distorted. It was as if countless cracks had been torn open, and the many cracks overlapped with each other, forming the mouth of a huge beast. Tyron walked out from the huge beast's mouth, stepping on void space. The mouth of this huge beast was the entrance to his divine country. With each step he took, the surrounding air and space would become intensely distorted. Just the repercussive waves from his martial will alone caused friction in the air, heating up the entire tsunami to a high temperature of several hundred degrees Celsius. Endless white bubbles appeared. The sea monarch narrowed his eyes and stared at Tyrant, who had walked out from the huge beast's mouth. A hint of wariness flashed in his eyes. With Tyrant's appearance, the huge beast's mouth, which was formed from countless spatial gaps, roared into the sky, and the entire tsunami was forced back. At the next moment, Tyrant put out his hand, and the huge beast behind him pounced out, dashing out toward the female warrior who had let out a delicate bellow. With a dash, the huge mouth swelled up. In the blink of an eye, it seemed to be about to cover up half the size of the tsunami, wanting to engulf the several 10,000 soldiers and the endless seawater in a single gulp. Looking at the huge beast's prowess that was capable of engulfing the entire world, the female warrior who had shouted out earlier was shocked by this prowess, even though she was also a divine-level expert. She was only at Tier 1 of the divine level and could not summon any thoughts of resisting. The sea monarch frowned. Faced with the huge beast that was about to engulf him, he raised his fist, clenched it slightly, and then punched out. It was an ordinary punch, but it brought about a shocking effect. Terrifying waves gushed out from the sea monarch's fist, and space shattered inch by inch like glass. The plasma shock waves caused by the fist lashing out at the atmosphere were like a super huge tsunami, smashing out toward the huge beast that was pouncing over. Kacha-kacha sounds kept ringing out, and it was as if the space was going to be torn apart by the power of this punch. When everyone present saw that punch, they felt as if they were alone in the seawater and then had to face a raging storm. With a loud rumble, as the two gushes of power collided fiercely, the huge beast was suddenly shattered and dissipated. The sea monarch could not help but take 3 steps back, and the tsunami under his feet was also forced out of the imperial capital's perimeter. All right, the sea monarch let out a low bellow. You're the sword overlord Feng Xingjian, right? As expected of the #1 expert in the southern continent. Humph. Tyrant let out a cold laugh and looked at the sea monarch with a mocking expression, saying, "A frog at the bottom of a well dares to boast about how vast the sky is? I'm Tyrant, the East Military Enforcement Order's Commander-in-Chief, and one of the divine-level experts under the Sword Overlord." As he spoke, the lady who had shouted out earlier let out an agonizing cry. She shattered like glass, and she was seriously injured. Chapter 989. When did it happen? The sea monarch's countenance turned extremely grim. He took a long look at Tyrant and gasped inwardly. Ever since the world's metamorphosis, he had gathered all sorts of resources from the 10 overseas countries and focused on attaining breakthroughs. Right now, he felt that he had reached the pinnacle of his cultivation and was confident that he was not much weaker than the many top-notch experts in the world. He might even surpass them. Therefore, when he heard about the news of the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures, he came out of seclusion. One reason was that he wanted to use his current strength to snatch an opportunity and increase his chances of attaining a breakthrough to Tier 6 of the divine level. Another reason was that he wanted to meet the top-notch experts in the world and make a name for himself, letting people know of his reputation as the Sea Monarch. He had also wanted to challenge the so-called Sword Overlord Feng Xingjian. However, he had not expected that the first time he made a move, he would be evenly matched with Feng Xingjian's subordinate. His subordinate had even been seriously injured. It could be said that he had already lost. Just one of his subordinates is already so powerful. In that case, how strong was Feng Xingjian himself? How powerful are the Mage Association's Mage Kings, Guardian Kings, and Saint from the Holy Sea of Truth? At the thought of this, the Sea Monarch could not help but feel shaken. "We've been presumptuous this time around," he said, cupping his hands together. "Lord Tyrant, I've learned a thing or two." At the next moment, he opened his mouth and inhaled, sucking in all the seawater and several 10,000 soldiers into his mouth. Clearly, he had put them into his divine country. Then with a flash, he landed on the stone platform representing the various overseas countries. After Tyrant, who was in the sky, did all of this, he remained expressionless as he threw a cold glance toward everyone in the square. Wherever his gaze passed by, Everyone was as quiet as cicadas in winter. The warning and threat in his eyes were clear. With a cold snort, Tyrant took a step forward and landed on a stone platform. That stone platform could be said to be the largest and tallest among the many stone platforms. It floated in the center and was also where the Empire's people were standing. Before Tyrant arrived, there were already a few officials from the Empire standing on it. Seeing that Tyrant had landed, the few officials smiled and went up to him. Sir Tyrant's cultivation base is getting more and more exquisite. Teaching these monkeys from overseas a lesson has really raised the prestige of our empire. Done. Tyrant waved his hand and said coldly, "Don't flatter me. Instead, what are you guys doing here? You're the vice president of the Knight Association and the principal of the Royal School. Why are you staying here to watch the show instead of doing your job?" The few people in front of Tyrant instantly tensed up. As Tyrant waved his hand, they retreated one by one, leaving only Tyrant standing on the highest stone platform. From time to time, his gaze would sweep across the various major forces on the stone platform. No one knew what he was thinking. Just then, another 2 bright moons lit up in the sky. The 2 divine-level experts, the blue sacred moonlight and Lan Yu, had arrived. Under the lead of the 2 ladies dressed in white, over 10 young ladies who were as beautiful as flowers and had slender figures descended from the sky. They landed on a stone platform like fairies descending to the mortal world, attracting the gazes of countless male knights. Then a stream of seething flames lit up in the west. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a path of flames that spanned across the sky for several 10,000 kilometers. The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch brought along a group of people and landed on a stone platform in the blink of an eye. The moment the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch arrived on the stone platform, he headed toward Tyrant and greeted him with a smile. "Lord Commander, it's been a long time since we last met in the desert. I didn't expect that your cultivation has improved once again." After witnessing Fong Xingjian's ferocious powers, as well as the tremendous improvements that Tyrant and the others had, as well as sensing the Sword Overlord's increasing prowess in the south, the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch had long since become someone who was loyal to the Empire. He wanted to get on good terms with the 4th Prince, Tyrant, and the others, cozying up to Fong Xingjian. Looking at the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch, Tyrant nodded. "Patriarch, it's been hard on you during this period of time. There are many people with ulterior motives in the divine treasures meeting this time around. We've troubled you." The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch smiled and shook his head. "Sigh, this is just a small matter. It's all thanks to Lord Commander's East Military Order that you're able to assess the martial world, wipe out the rebels, and return peace to the Empire." At the next moment, a stream of sword chi soared into the sky from the Imperial Capital's palace. The sword chi was extremely gloomy and cold, as if it contained waves of deathly aura that came from hell. It brought about a bone-piercing chill that came from the depths of one's heart, causing the brows of countless experts present to twitch furiously. They had a feeling as if their lives were out of their control and were about to burst out from their bodies. This sword attack seemed to contain the netherworld of hell. As the sword chi descended onto the stone platform, the 4th Prince's and Prince Philip's appearances were revealed. The 4th Prince looked at Tyrant and the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch, smiled, and said, "Patriarch and Tyrant, you guys must have waited for a long time, right?" Tyrant did not say anything, but the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch smiled and moved closer. "Greetings, 4th Prince and Lord Philip." "Patriarch, you're being too polite," the 4th Prince said. "The desert has just been pacified. Patriarch, you'll still need to put in more effort to manage it." "It's what I should do." Philip threw a glance at Tyrant, whose face was filled with coldness and killing intent, and sighed inwardly. Ever since Fong Xingjian took charge of the East Military Execution Order, he had annihilated many clans, and his killing intent had gotten increasingly stronger. Moreover, Fong Xingjian was not a good person to begin with, and his character could be said to have become even more vile. Even though Philip could sense the killing intent in Fong Xingjian's heart, he still felt uncomfortable. On the other side, The sea monarch's countenance turned even grimmer as he watched the divine-level experts appearing one after another on the stone platforms belonging to the various overseas countries. Earlier on, regardless of whether it was the blue sacred moonlight, Lanyu, the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch, the fourth prince, or Prince Philip, all of them had been extremely difficult to deal with through his sudden inspiration. They had even vaguely revealed their identities as Tier 5 divine-level experts. With a grim countenance, the Sea Monarch asked the overseas royal family, "These people are all the subordinates of the Empire's Feng Xinjiang?" That's right. They should be the strongest divine-level experts under Feng Xinjiang. It said that all of them have reached Tier 5 of the divine level. I wonder what kind of sorcery Feng Xinjiang has. Other than the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch, none of the others have reached Tier 5 of the divine level 3 months ago. Hearing this, the Sea Monarch's countenance turned even grimmer. There was only one thought in his mind. If the Empire is already this powerful, then how terrifying would the Mage Association and the Holy Sea of Truth be? He suddenly felt a little disheartened. There are still too many experts in this world. It seems that our overseas countries are still unable to enter the main continent. That you're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.